On the way out of the castle, Kai was strangely silent. Sunny maybe should have been more concerned about that, but for now he didn't mind. He had enough to think about. Going back to that lodge, there were a lot of things that were there that he had hoped to never see, feel, or experience again. For a moment, he even thought about rushing straight back into his cathedral without making good on his promise. But why should he? It's not like he asked to be invited back. Nephis was the one who wanted his help with something. Just pretend like you don't care. Also, demand to be compensated for whatever it is they want you to do. You're an outsider now, and your services won't be cheap. Yeah, that was the best option. He wasn't going to agree to anything that didn't serve his own selfish interests. And there were a lot of things that Changing Star, with her thriving hunting party and following, could provide him with. There was this one thing in particular, something he really wanted to do, but couldn't on his own. Maybe they would be able to help him with that. As they were approaching the lodge, Kai suddenly asked in a serious tone, "Sunny, why did you want me to come with you? Really?" Hesitated, then said, "I want you to tell me if I'm being lied to." Kai frowned. "I thought that Lady Nephis was your friend. Why are you so wary of her?" Sunny chuckled. Was she a friend? Even he didn't know what exactly the two of them were to each other anymore, or what they had been before. Worse yet, he wasn't sure what they would become. She's the kind of friend you don't really want to lower your guard around. He lingered for a moment, then added, "There's also a guy called Castor. He's the one I especially don't trust." The archer raised his eyebrows. "I've only heard good things about Castor. Why him specifically?" Sunny cast a sideways glance at him and scowled. To be honest, Castor hadn't really done anything to deserve his hostility, but there was just something about the proud legacy that gave Sunny a familiar feeling of unease. He was too perfect. In Sunny's experience, only people with bad intentions were capable of appearing so flawless. Perhaps he was wrong, but the policy of always assuming the worst had too clean of a track record to be abandoned now. "There's something about him I just can't quite put my finger on. He's almost too nice, too perfect." Seemingly satisfied with this answer, Kai shrugged and followed Sunny into the lodge. The headquarters of Changing Star's hunting party had changed a lot since his last visit. It had already looked pretty presentable back when he was a member, but now the lodge was much more impressive. The first thing that caught his eye was that it had grown much bigger. During the months of his absence, additional structures were built to expand it both horizontally and vertically. Now it was by far the largest building in the outer settlement, almost starting to resemble a small town hall. It was heavily fortified too, especially from the side that faced the White Road. A couple of lookouts were visible on the roof, observing the ruins below. They were wearing armor-type memories and holding bows in their hands. It was a far cry from how things were before. Inside, a lot of people were busy with various tasks. Sunny froze for a moment, disoriented by all the activity. He almost felt as though he had somehow mistakenly returned to the castle. The reason for it was not the neat and tastefully decorated interior, with warm carpets covering the stone floor and various tapestries hanging on the sturdy stone walls. No, the main difference was in how people here comported themselves. The rot of hopelessness was almost gone from their eyes, replaced with energy and vigor. Sunny frowned. Why hasn't Gunlog put an end to all this yet? From everything that he saw, Nephis was almost asking to be destroyed. How was all of this possible? His grim thoughts were disrupted by a young woman who greeted them with a smile. "Welcome. Can I help you with something?" Sunny stared at the smiling girl, trying to remember if he knew her. None came to mind. Trying to remove the scowl from his face, he answered in a flat tone. "Nephis is expecting me." The young woman blinked.
Sorry, who is Nephis?
Sonny rolled his eyes.
Sorry, Lady Nephis is expecting me. You know, changing star of the Immortal Flame Clan.
The young woman's eyes widened.
Oh, I see. Let me show you the way.
Sonny wanted to retort that he knew the way, but truth be told, he wasn't sure that he did. With all the changes that happened to the lodge, he had no idea where things were. On their way, they passed the tiny room that used to belong to him. Just as they were walking by, Sonny glanced inside and saw that it was now home to someone else. In fact, he recognized a couple of things that the new owner left on the narrow cot. They were Castor's. A corner of his mouth curled upwards.
Figures.
It seemed as though he was thoroughly replaced by the scion of the Lee clan. Well, whatever. The cot was not very comfortable anyway, unlike his luxurious wide bed in the hidden chamber of the cathedral. Finally, the young woman led them to the area that used to be the central hall of the old lodge. Now it was separated from the rest of it by a thick wall, with a sturdy wooden door barring the way inside. Sonny took a deep breath, then walked in. He had imagined that moment a lot of times in the past. Granted, he never thought that his reunion with the cohort would happen in the presence of an unreasonably attractive, washed-out pop star, but still. Inside the room, a wide window opened onto an eerily breathtaking view of the dark city. On the wall beside it, a map of the ruins was littered with various markings that contained valuable information. They seemed to be much denser than before. There was a large wooden table beside the window, around which stood 7 makeshift chairs. Currently, only 2 were occupied. Effie was sitting in one, her feet unceremoniously resting on the table. As always, she looked extremely comfortable and relaxed. On the other chair next to her, a beautiful blind girl was cradling a cup in her delicate hands. It was Cassia. Nephis and Castor stood near the map, discussing something with each other. The 4 of them were the core of the Immortal Flame hunting party. Once Sonny and Kai entered, everyone turned to them. Sonny put on a brave face and forced out a grin.
Oh, so many familiar faces. Hi, everyone. No need to say how much you missed me. Anyway, this is Kai. Kai, say hi to everyone. These are Cassia, Castor, and Effie. You already know Nephis.
Giving him a strange look, the charming archer smiled dazzlingly and said in his ridiculously beautiful voice, hello, Lady Nephis, Cassia, Castor, Huntress Athena. It's very nice to meet you. Cassia giggled.
Huh. You won't believe it, guys. I thought I just heard Night from Nightingale say my name. Crazy, right?
Kai blinked. Oh, sorry. I am Night from Nightingale, actually. Effie leaned forward and extended one arm. Cassia's face, meanwhile, grew deathly pale. An expression of utter terror appeared on it. Her hands trembled, and the cup she was holding fell from them. Catching the cup just a moment before it hit the floor, Effie sighed and shook her head.
Every time. This happens every time.
Sonny furrowed his brow and glanced at the beautiful archer with disdain.
Oh, come on. Was that reaction really necessary?
The 4 people in the room reacted to his arrival differently. Nephis seemed to be indifferent, as always. However, Sonny knew her well enough to notice a strange tension hiding in the depths of her calm gray eyes. Castor greeted him with an amiable smile, but there was coldness hiding behind it. It seemed as though the handsome scion was not happy about this turn of events. Did he see Sonny as a rival for Nephis's attention? Or was there more to it? In any case, it was not Sonny's problem. He did not plan to return to the cohort prematurely. Castor could have all of Nephis's attention to himself. Effie looked at him with genuine surprise.
Doofus? You are actually alive?
Sonny blinked and then stared at her for a few moments, then replied in an acrid tone,
Sorry to disappoint.
She shook her head.
No, just... How the hell did you manage to survive 3 whole months in the ruins?
He grinned.
What can I say? I had a good teacher.
Since Effie was the one who taught him how to navigate the Dark City, that compliment was directed at her. However, the huntress simply shook her head.
No student of mine would be stupid enough to live in the ruins, not to mention returning looking so feral.
Sonny tilted his head to the side. Did he look feral? Sonny took a mental picture of himself, ragged clothes, dirty hair, a crooked grin, a hint of madness burning in his eyes. No, he couldn't see anything wrong with how he looked. In fact, he thought he looked great. With an offended frown, he glanced at Effie.
You're one to talk.
The huntress glared at him for a few moments, then laughed.
I've had more pressing problems than my appearance.
And finally, there was Cassia. Cassia seemed to have changed the most out of all of them. The changes were not instantly apparent, but to Sonny, who knew her so well, they were unmistakable. The blind girl seemed more mature. She looked older somehow. It was as if there was an invisible weight pressing down on her, the kind that people usually accumulate with the flow of years. Her demeanor was calmer, more restrained, almost cold.
Welcome back, Sonny. I'm so happy that you're all right.
Giving him a polite smile, she grew silent and turned away. This wasn't exactly the kind of welcome he had expected from her. He had been sure that the blind girl would hug him at least. That was how it always happened in his head. Sonny shook it off and thought,
maybe she is shy because of Kai.
However, Sonny had a feeling that he already knew the true reason for her subdued attitude. He just didn't want to admit it. It was the vision. That damn vision. Chasing away the feeling of dread, he sat down on one of the chairs and offered another one to Kai.
So, what did you guys want to discuss?
Nephis and Castor exchanged glances. Before saying anything, Castor walked over to the door and closed it. After that, he summoned a memory that looked like a bone flute and placed it on the table. Immediately, something in the room imperceptibly changed. Sonny raised an eyebrow.
What is that thing?
The handsome young man sat on a chair next to Changing Star. This memory has an enchantment that creates a cone of silence. No one outside this room will be able to hear what we are talking about now. This fact alone was already enough to tell Sonny that they were going to discuss something that had to do with the Bright Lord, Gunlog himself. Suddenly, he felt an irrational desire to be anywhere else but in this brightly lit room. The wide window began to look very alluring. He sighed.
So, the Bright Lord is finally ready to obliterate you all? Can't say that I'm surprised. If anything, it's strange that he didn't make a move much earlier.
Effie giggled.
Oh, did he ever?
Nephis glanced at her, making the huntress fall silent, and turned to Sonny. You are right. The Bright Lord is indeed about to make a move. We have withstood his previous attacks, but they were just a rehearsal. A few provocations to test our strength. Now he is ready to act in earnest. And that's why I need your help. Sonny raised his eyebrow.
How can a cockroach like me help the great and mighty Changing Star, heir of the immortal flame?
Effie gave him and Nephis a strange look, then cleared her throat.
Don't take it to heart, princess, but I sort of agree with Sonny. What can this little imp, no offense, Sonny, do that we can't? I mean, he is a decent scout, but...
Sonny sneered at Effie.
Hey, offense taken.
Changing Star smiled, then nodded at Sonny. Don't be misled by his act, Effie. Sonny might behave like a cowardly weakling, but in fact, he's the last person in the Dark City I would want to face in combat. He is far more dangerous than anyone thinks he is. Isn't that right, Sonny? The smile froze on his face. A few moments passed in silence, with everyone staring at him. Finally, Sonny sighed.
Oh well, I guess the secret is out of the box. Surprise, everybody. I'm actually not a weakling. Who could have thought?
Then he glared at Effie and added in a mocking tone.
Oh, my mistake. Actually, everyone except for you already knew. It seems that you are.
However, Nephis interrupted him. That's why he was able to survive 3 months in the ruins, just like he had survived 2 days in the labyrinth. Sunny is an extremely formidable fighter. Sunny smirked and thought,
Wow, is she trying to flatter me?
Nephis finished her thought. He's just a bit of a devious asshole, but that's exactly what makes him so dangerous. Sunny frowned and silently added,
I guess not.
Looking at Effie, Sunny shrugged and smirked.
If you don't believe her, just ask Knight.
Suddenly dragged into the conversation, Kai coughed. Yes. I can confirm. He is indeed a bit of an asshole. Sunny's face twitched.
Not that. Tell them how I saved you.
The charming archer fluttered his eyelashes with an innocent look, then added, Oh, right. Indeed. Sunny saved me in the ruins last night. He's a very exceptional and resourceful individual. Sunny glanced at Effie with triumph. He didn't really want to provoke the tall huntress any further, but she did call him a little imp. Sunny puffed out his chest.
See, Knight has known me for just one night, but even he was able to see how fearsome I am. You and I, on the other hand, had hunted together for an entire month. How come you're so dense?
Whatever. It's not like you would be spending a lot of time with Effie. Let her boil with anger. With a teasing smile on his lips, Sunny turned to Nephis.
Anyway, what exactly did you want me to do?
Changing Star hesitated. I want you to take Effie to your hideout in the ruins and keep her safe there for about a week. Sunny blinked. Maybe he shouldn't have been so rude to the short-tempered giant. She was going to grind him to dust. Sunny grew silent and tried very hard not to look at the huntress, who was glaring at him with murder in her eyes. Did he hear it right?
Excuse me? You want me to keep Effie safe?
Nephis gave him a nod. When Sunny didn't immediately acquiesce, she sighed. Nephis was not used to getting pushback. I guess I owe you an explanation. With a frown, she glanced at the map of the Dark City. Her gaze was fixed on the symbol of a tower drawn in its center with white paint, the Bright Castle. She tapped her finger on the symbol. You asked why Gunlog hasn't killed us all yet. This is a good question. However, the answer is complicated. Changing Star turned her head and looked at Sunny. Partially, it is because I have not challenged him openly yet. I also haven't done anything to justify an intervention. Everything we have accomplished for the benefit of the outer settlement not only fell outside the purview of his reign over the castle, but also strengthened the human position on the Forgotten Shore overall. Officially, he has no grounds to accuse me. Sunny scoffed.
It's not like Gunlog really needs justification. He only needs the pretense of one, and even then just barely.
Nephis slightly frowned. You are right. If he really wanted to escalate the situation and bring about an open conflict, he could have easily created a reason. Alternatively, he could have sent Horus under the cover of night to make me disappear without a trace. But he didn't. And we are not entirely sure why. Sunny blinked as it dawned on him.
You don't know.
Glancing at Castor, Nephis shook her head. There are several possible reasons. Perhaps he is uncertain if Horus will be able to dispose of me. Perhaps he is using the growing status of the outer settlement as a deterrent against his lieutenant's ambitions. Perhaps he is just confident and patient. Whatever the case, Gunlog more or less tolerated our existence for these past 4 months. Castor sighed. And crossed his arms over his chest. Of course, there were still challenges we had to overcome. If we weren't cautious in how we dealt with these provocations, things would have been very different. Changing Star nodded. Indeed, there were several attempts to taunt us into confrontation already. Nothing too bloody, though. However, things seem to have changed. We received word from the castle that Gunlog is going to act against us soon. This time, he is aiming at one of my companions. The attack will be a serious one, and the target is Effie." Sonny glanced at the unruly huntress and raised his eyebrows. He had a lot of questions.
Why her?
Castor clenched his fists. He struggled and failed to keep the edge of annoyance from his voice. "Gunlog could have targeted any of us, really, but Effie, despite all my warnings, got into a rather vulgar argument with a bunch of guards who came into the outer settlement for some entertainment. Coincidentally, some of these guards went missing last night. No one knows what happened to them." Sonny was pretty sure that he knew exactly what had happened to them, though. After all, he was the one who killed them, but the rest of the group didn't need to know any of this. "Actually, I might know something about that," Kai suddenly said, smiling like an idiot. Sonny growled inside.
"Shit, who asked that fool to open his mouth?"
He tried to make the archer shut up with a murderous stare, but it was already too late. Kai enthusiastically went on to describe how he was kidnapped, put in the well, and then rescued by a mysterious stranger, who turned out to be Sonny. Luckily, he was under the impression that the kidnappers were all slaughtered by the Black Knight, not realizing that Sonny was the one who had lured them into the cathedral in the first place, after personally killing their leader. If Kai knew the full truth, things might have turned rather awkward. After he was done talking, Castor sighed. "Oh, thank you. This is a very valuable piece of information. Sadly, it doesn't change anything. Whether those guards were murdered by a nightmare creature or not, the Bright Lord has more than enough reasonable doubt to pin the blame on Effie, which means she's in danger. Gunlog is going to use her as a hostage and force Lady Nephis to challenge him. If she does, he will kill her. If she doesn't, Effie will die and our reputation will be ruined. Either way, he wins." Sonny cast a sideways glance at Effie, who was still relaxed and seemingly undisturbed by the prospect of dying horribly in the dungeons of the Bright Castle. In fact, she was currently more interested in fishing out a piece of meat that was stuck between her pearly teeth, and not paying Castor any attention. Sonny blinked and thought scornfully,
"What a lunatic. This is the person we're all risking our lives for?"
As if it could read his mind, Sonny's shadow shook its head at the irony of Sonny's condemnations. Sonny turned to Nephis and Castor.
"How do you know all of this?"
In fact, this question was moot. He already had the idea. To receive information about Gunlog's plans, they had to have a spy in the castle. More than that, given the nature of that information, it had to be someone of considerable rank, perhaps even someone in the inner circle of the Bright Lord. Was Neph working with one of the lieutenants? Each of those 5 monsters was dangerous and very well situated in Gunlog's army. Sonny wondered who would be so foolish as to betray their own interests. Maybe Nephis's efforts had begun to sow discord in the walls of Bright Castle. It had been a while since Sonny set foot in there, so it was possible. His eyes swept over the room. Sonny counted the number of chairs in the room. There were 7 chairs, but only 6 people. Sonny drummed his fingers on the table. He thought, interesting. It was clear Nephis didn't trust him. Not anymore. He hadn't expected her to give him an honest answer, but he thought she'd at least be the one to respond. Instead, Castor spoke up. "We have an ally." Sonny decided not to press the issue any further. Frankly, he didn't really want to know. There was just one last question he wanted to ask.
"I see. Well, there is one last thing that I don't really understand. You said to keep Effie safe for a week. What is going to change in a week? I doubt that Gunlog will magically forget everything after a few days."
A heavy silence descended on the room. No one seemed to want to speak first. After a few moments passed, Nephis finally broke the silence. Looking in the window, she leaned back and said in her usual, even indifferent tone, "In a week, we will be ready to leave the city." Sonny almost fell from his chair. Nephis was almost ready to make her move? Sonny knew how bloody that would be. Soon, another map was spread on the table. This one was drawn on a piece of crude parchment made out of monster hide, and much less detailed than the one hanging on the wall. Well, that was understandable, because the second map did not depict the Dark City, but the Forgotten Shore itself. Sonny stared at it in stunned silence. Nephis had not wasted any time during these 3 months. He had no idea how she had gathered all this information, but there was a lot more on the map than he could have ever imagined. At the center of it, a straight black line depicted the Crimson Spire. The labyrinth flowed from it, flooding the parchment like an ocean of blood. To the east, a small circle of black ink with a symbol of a white tower inside of it marked the Dark City. The city was perched on the edge of another, much larger circle. It didn't take too much effort to recognize the Cyclopean crater. After all, Sonny had traversed it on a rickety boat once, a lifetime ago. However, only now, looking at it in scale, did he finally realize just how giant the crater was, and how vast the Forgotten Shore itself appeared. Back on Earth, it would have been as large as a continent. The Dream Realm was indeed much bigger than their own planet, considering that just one of its numerous regions was this enormous. There were other symbols on the map that he didn't recognize. However, several of them attracted his attention especially. On the other side of the crater, almost exactly opposite the Dark City, a symbol of a tree depicts the Ashen Barrow. Some distance to the east of it, on a straight line, there was a mark in the shape of a red cross. Another red cross was drawn inside the crater just outside the eastern side of the Dark City. The third one was about a week's worth of traveling time to the north, near a symbol that looked like a grotesque misshapen skull. The fourth one was halfway between the ruins and the Crimson Spire. The fifth one lay to the south, about the same distance as the third, drawn atop the symbol of an arching bridge. The last red cross was at the very edge of the parchment, far away to the south, beyond the labyrinth. Near it, 2 symbols were drawn. One was a crown, and the other one was a question mark. Sonny quickly realized what these crosses represented. They were the giant statues of the 7 forgotten heroes who had given the terrible oath to vanquish the darkness and had created the Starlight Legion. The one to the east of the Soul Devourer was the statue of the knight that he had used as shelter on his first night in the Dream Realm. The one near the walls of the city belonged to the woman whose hand had saved them from drowning in the dark sea on the night of their escape. The other 4 crosses, most likely, marked 4 more headless statues. But where was the 7th? Frowning, Sonny glanced at the map. So, let me get this straight. You want to leave the Dark City, cross the labyrinth, reach the edges of the Forgotten Shore, and then return? Nephis smiled. Pretty much, yes. He sighed. If we somehow survive the months of traveling through the labyrinth and manage to escape it, why the hell would we return? The smile on her face withered. Changing Star lingered for a few moments, then pointed to the 3 symbols at the lower edge of the map. The red cross, the question mark, and the crown. The first lord of the castle led an expedition to find the way out of the Forgotten Shore. This is where his trail disappeared. From what we were able to learn, an unassailable mountain chain blocks the path to the south. They ventured into the mountains and never returned. Nothing but death awaits us there. Sonny scratched the back of his head. So, you aren't looking for a way out. You're looking for the remains of the cohort of sleepers that had conquered the castle 15 years ago. Neff nodded. There is an ancient item that they took away from the castle. If we find it, we have a chance in the fight against Gunlog. Sonny frowned. He felt as though she was not telling him everything. Maybe what little trust remained between them was not enough to share those secrets. Maybe she didn't want someone else in the room to hear them. But then again, he didn't care. Changing Star's business was her own. Sunny was just here as a potential mercenary. As long as the reward was worth it, he was ready to not ask any questions. Provided that his ignorance was not going to get him killed, of course. Feeling his hesitation, Nephis added, "The way to the mountains is not as dangerous as you think. There is a method we can use to reach them comparatively safely. But once we're there, that's where we'll need your talents. Having you with us will make a lot of things easier." Sunny looked at her with doubt.
How do you know all of this? It's not like there's anyone in the Dark City who was alive back then.
Nephis shrugged. "There isn't, but there are stories, some written evidence. However, most of this we have learned from Cassia's visions." She gave the blind girl a warm look. "Cassia has helped us a lot." Sunny had to think. If Changing Star made this plan, it meant that she had good reasons to believe that it was doable. Of course, there would be danger. Nothing on the Forgotten Shore was ever safe or easy, but there was a rare opportunity in all of this too. He felt very tempted to leave the ruins for a few months in the company of an extremely formidable cohort. Outside the walls of the Dark City, nightmare creatures were generally of a lower rank than those inside. The efficiency of his hunting would be much higher, which would land him more shadow fragments and memories to feed the Stone Saint, especially if powerhouses like Nephis, Effie, and Castor were fighting alongside him. But more importantly, if Cassia was there to warn them of the dangers that they had no business trying to fight. He never forgot how many times her affinity to mysteries and revelations had saved their lives in the past, like on that awful night when they had summoned a terrifying beast from the depths of the Dark Sea. With a true seer accompanying them, the most harrowing thing about the labyrinth, the cursed black waters, was not as unknowable and thus deadly anymore. So he was not immediately against the idea, more so because he would be additionally compensated for the efforts. But there was something else that he had to consider. Looking up, Sunny glanced at the people gathered in the room and cleared his throat.
I would like to talk to Nephis alone, please."
Most of them just stared at him without moving. Castor especially did not seem happy about the prospect. Sunny wondered,
What is it about him and Neph? Why is he so possessive?
But after Changing Star gave them a look, they reluctantly stood up and left the room, one after another. Soon, Sunny and Nephis were left alone. He hesitated for a long time before finally speaking. His voice was raw and hoarse.
"Neph, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to pull me back? Don't you know how this all will end?"
She watched him silently for a while, with an inexorable expression. "Because there's only two people I trust in this world, Sunny. One is Cassia. The other is you. I only trust you to have my back." He couldn't help but laugh bitterly.
Have your back? Neph, you know what awaits the two of us in the future. This story won't have a happy ending. There'll be only sorrow, pain, and rage, remember?
Changing Star lingered for a few moments. Her face was calm and firm. When the silence became almost overwhelming, "Life is not a story, Sunny. It only ends when you die." He smiled crookedly, not knowing how to answer. Nephis took this as an opportunity to press on. "So, will you help me?" Sunny sighed and stood up, glancing at the map of the Forgotten Shore one last time.
"I don't know. I need some time to think. I'll take Effie and keep her safe for a week. You'll have the answer once we meet again."
She nodded, accepting that condition. Turning around, Sunny forced himself to appear nonchalant and left. As soon as the door closed behind him, his expression changed. He had been so caught up in the enormity of Nefis's tasks that he didn't even ask what he'd get out of the arrangement. Sure, in the past she'd always been fair, but this was a person Sonny barely recognized. He didn't know if he even knew Nefis anymore. And it was happening at just the time he'd needed to trust her the most. Nefis's plan sounded insane. They'd all get slaughtered. So why did he want, more than anything, to fall in line and follow her? After finishing his conversation with Nefis, Sonny wandered back through the crowded lodge in search of Effie and Kai. The two of them were in the dining area discussing something between themselves. He noticed Castor observing him from the stairs leading to the second floor, but chose to ignore the man. More curiously, there was no sign of Cassia anywhere. Sonny wondered if she was avoiding him and hoped that was not the case. No matter what had happened between him and Nefis, he still thought of Cassia as a friend, maybe his only friend. Somewhat disappointed, Sonny landed on a chair next to Kai and Effie and gave them a dark look.
What, the two of you know each other?
Kai smiled. Who doesn't know the great huntress? We had, a few brushes in the past. Deciding not to inquire what type of brushes he was talking about, Sonny sighed.
Does she know about that peculiar flaw of yours?
The charming young man blinked a couple of times. I guess so. I don't make a secret out of it. Great. Of all the people in the world, he got stuck with two weirdos who had no qualms about telling every random stranger about their most hidden vulnerability. Well, if he had a flaw like Kai's, he wouldn't worry about it too much either. Since there was no point in pretending anymore, Sonny simply asked,
Well, was anyone in that room lying?
Effie grinned. Ah, so that's why you dragged Knight along. Paranoid much? Sonny would love nothing more than to ignore that question, but unfortunately his own flaw was much more restrictive than Kai's.
Not at all. In fact, I think I'm exactly as anxious as a person should be, by which I mean extremely, of course.
Saying that, he looked at the charming archer with expectation. Kai hesitated for a few moments. No one said a single lie. Your friends are all extremely honest people, Sonny. Sonny sighed and thought,
Oh, you poor fool.
Not knowing how to react to that display of naivete, Sonny shook his head and lowered his voice.
Not even Castor?
Kai gave him a nod. No, he was honest too. Was Sonny wrong? Was Castor really just an honest and honorable guy? Was his distrust irrational? Somewhat unsure, Sonny lingered for a bit and then turned to Effie.
Neff and I agreed to continue our conversation in a week. Until then, you'll be under my protection.
The huntress giggled.
Wow, that makes me feel really safe. Thanks, Shorty.
Sonny grimaced.
Don't you worry. I might not look like much, but wait till you see my roommate.
Kai suddenly choked on his drink and paled a little. Reminded of something, Sonny patted him on the back.
Anyway, thanks for your help. Our deal is done. See you around, I guess.
He was not going to miss the gorgeous archer one bit. Sonny wasn't winning any prizes with his looks already, but next to Kai, he was completely invisible. Honestly, the other man was downright distracting. The charming archer looked at him for a few moments, then forced out a smile. Yeah, it was nice to make your acquaintance, Sonny. I can honestly say that spending time with you is, an unforgettable experience. With that, he glanced at Effie with something that resembled pity, rose, and left. The two of them were left alone. The huntress looked around with a weary expression and then asked in a neutral tone, So, when do we leave? Sonny didn't hesitate.
Right now. Honestly, I can't wait to get back to the ruins. This place, It gives me the creeps." Effie gave him a strange look, then shrugged. "Sure, no problem. Let's ditch this scary place and go hide in the ancient cursed ruins. At least we can feel safe there, right?" Sometime later, they were carefully walking through the streets of the dark city. Being here in daylight was not something Sonny was accustomed to, so he was justifiably tense. Luckily, both of them were experienced hunters and worked well together. Sonny fell into the familiar rhythm of cooperating with Effie without skipping a beat. As though 3 whole months had not passed since they last saw each other, it was honestly nothing short of jolly. At some point, the unruly huntress glanced at him. "But seriously, how did you survive, Sonny?" He gave her a dark look, then shrugged. "How do you think? You know that I'm very good at hiding in the shadows. I slept during the day and hunted during the night, observed my prey carefully before striking at their weak spots. If I ever met something I wasn't sure I could kill, I ran." She became thoughtful for a while. "It's noticeable, you know. You've changed. You look, feel like a true hunter now." Sonny grinned. "Well, I would hope so. I hunted more nightmare creatures than was reasonable, really." She smirked. "How many?" That was a good question. Sonny gave it some thought, trying to discern the true answer. "Around 60? Yeah, no, more than that, I think." Together with those terrors he had slain in the labyrinth, his kill count had long ago moved past 100. Effie blinked and looked at him with a dark expression. That many hunts in only 3 months. The number was nothing short of staggering. It was completely insane. Out in the real world, it was widely known that awakened nightmare creatures were too tough for mere sleepers to fight. Anyone who managed to prevail in a battle against one would earn themselves a proper reputation. Killing a dozen would make a person famous. If Sonny were to return home and claim that he had slaughtered 100, most of them in a cursed ruin populated by fallen abominations, the news of his accomplishment would fly around the whole planet in an instant. He would be hailed as an unparalleled genius and a hope of the entire generation. And yet, there were dozens of people just like him in the Dark City, many of them even more accomplished. Effie had several hundred hunts under her belt. There were a couple more hunters in the outer settlement whose track record was just as impressive. Inside the Bright Castle, there was Gunlog himself, his 5 lieutenants, all the pathfinders of the host, more than a few experienced hunters, and even a handful of guards with a lot of battle scars to prove their prowess. All of them were at a level that sleepers simply weren't supposed to ever achieve. The Forgotten Shore was truly an interesting place. If Nephis were to somehow succeed and bring even just a handful of them back to the real world, how would the world change? Would other things that had been considered impossible before suddenly have their status put under scrutiny? Was it the reason why the spell gave her the name Changing Star? Was Nephis destined to not only create change, but also be the catalyst of it? Consumed with these thoughts, Sonny walked through the cursed ruins. Soon a familiar shape of the cathedral appeared before his eyes. Effie's voice tore him away from these thoughts. "Hey, Sonny, are you all right?" He hesitated for a bit, and then smiled. "Of course, never been better. Here we are, by the way. Welcome to my humble palace." The huntress looked at the grandiose cathedral with doubt. "Here? You live here?" Sonny remembered his first nightmare and shrugged. "What can I say? I have a weak spot for ancient temples." Effie eyed the cathedral skeptically. "If you expect me to step foot in that place, we need to talk." Sonny smirked. Did Effie know about the night? He didn't want to argue with the girl, but he also had no intention of finding a new hideout.
Effie regarded the cathedral for some time, then glanced at Sonny with doubt.
I know that nothing comes out alive from that temple. Are you sure that this is where you live?
With a carefree smile, Sonny shrugged. The fact that Effie had a sense of the danger hiding inside the ruined church made sense. Even if this place was situated outside of her usual hunting grounds, she had extensive knowledge of the Dark City, some from her own exploration and some from sharing information with other hunters. Dead tired and longing to return to the peaceful silence of his home, he didn't waste any time and told her about the Black Knight who guarded the cathedral. The unruly huntress scratched the back of her head.
So, there's a fallen devil inside. He's the roommate you were talking about.
Sonny gave her a nod.
That bastard endlessly patrols the ground floor and kills anything that comes through the doors. However, if we enter through the roof and stay hidden, we can reach my living quarters without any problem. More than that, nothing will bother us once we're there, because that bastard never comes that way and obliterates anything that tries.
Effie was silent for a while, then grinned.
So, you basically have a devil for a bodyguard. Pretty smart.
Sonny chuckled. Did Effie actually give him a compliment? Maybe the ice between them was starting to thaw. Effie was quick to add,
For a doofus like you.
Sonny smirked but didn't respond. Something told him that little jab was more out of fun than sincerity. Once they climbed up to the roof, there was a slight problem. Sonny failed to consider that the hole in the tiles that he used to enter the cathedral, well wide enough for his small frame, would be too tight for the tall and robust huntress to crawl through. Looking at the narrow gap between the massive plates of dark marble, Effie gave him a gloomy look. However, before Sonny could come up with an alternative plan, she simply bent down, grabbed one of the incredibly heavy plates, and moved it aside. The words died on his lips. Sonny marveled at her strength. He suspected Effie may even be able to take on the stone saint if she needed to. Before proceeding further, Sonny instructed Effie on how they were going to get her inside the hidden chamber and watched as the huntress reluctantly dismissed her bronze armor. With only a short white tunic covering her lovely olive skin and abundant figure, she looked very, comely. For a moment, his displeasure of having someone intrude upon the secluded peacefulness of his lair evaporated, but only for a moment. Overly conscious of his thoughts, Sonny shifted on his feet.
Don't get any strange ideas. I only asked you to remove your armor because it can get loud, and we can't risk drawing the Black Knight's attention.
Effie grinned.
Strange ideas? Why are you talking about having strange ideas all of a sudden? Sonny?
He gritted his teeth, turned away to hide his blushing face, and crawled into the hole between tiles. Once they landed on the support beam of the cathedral, Sonny guided Effie's hands to rest on his shoulders. Although the sun was still high in the sky, there wasn't any sunlight around them. Only the floor of the ancient temple beneath them was bathed in it. But even then, large areas of the grand hall looked as if they were drowned in deep shadow, only it wasn't shadow. It was darkness. Not one born from the absence of light, but true darkness, one which even his sight could not pierce. Sonny didn't know if it was summoned here by the Black Knight or simply obeyed him, but this was how the bastard had managed to sneak up on him unnoticed back when they first met. In any case, he had to guide Effie across the beams of the cathedral. One wrong step, and they would plunge to their deaths. Feeling rather awkward because of how close their bodies were to each other, Sonny quietly sighed and took a step forward. It was hard to concentrate. Sonny closed his eyes and took a breath. He quietly scolded himself.
Focus on the nightmare creature that might kill you, you idiot. That's what's important.
A few minutes later, they reached the hidden balcony behind the statue of the unknown goddess. Despite the fact that nothing out of the ordinary had happened, Sonny was rather on edge. Something told him that this was going to be a really long week. Once they entered his hidden chamber, Sonny informed Effie that she was free to create light and speak. Not wasting any time, the unruly huntress summoned a radiant memory and looked around with curiosity. The beautiful and spacious room that had once belonged to the priestess of this ancient temple was suddenly flooded with soft light. The intricate engravings on the walls created an atmosphere of sanctity and elegance. Here and there stood various pieces of furniture, most made out of opulent pale wood, with a few mismatched pieces that Sonny had scavenged from the ruins. Effie whistled.
Have to give it to you, Sonny. You sure know how to live in style. Who would have thought?
He smiled.
Jealous?
She sighed.
The important thing is that even if Gunlog tracks us here, none of his people would be able to enter. So we're indeed safe.
Slightly disappointed, Sonny shrugged.
Well, make yourself at home. I'll show you the back exit and the other stuff later.
With that, he furtively glanced around and tried to quickly hide a few things from sight to make his home more presentable. If he had known there was going to be a guest here, he would have cleaned up the mess a little in advance. Not that Effie paid it much attention. She walked around with curiosity, studying the engravings on the walls and ancient furniture. But then, suddenly, Sonny heard a loud giggle coming from behind. Turning around, he saw Effie standing in front of the wardrobe, hidden behind a stone panel. The wardrobe was currently open, showcasing the garments left behind by the priestess. The huntress looked at him with a strange smile. Sonny shot her a confused look.
What?
Effie shook her head.
No, nothing. It's just, you know, Sonny, when I first saw you, I thought, look at this tiny boy. He's just like a toy. You just want to dress him up like a doll and play with him.
Sonny blinked a couple of times, then scowled angrily.
Who are you calling tiny?
Not paying him any attention, the huntress glanced at the wardrobe and giggled again.
Who knew that you were into playing another kind of dress-up, huh?
It took Sonny a couple of seconds to realize what she was implying. When he did, he turned bright red from outrage.
What are you talking about? Those aren't mine. The priestess who lived here before left them behind.
Effie nodded a couple of times.
Sure. You just happen to have a wardrobe full of pretty dresses. By accident.
Sonny puffed his chest up.
That's the truth. I never lie.
She looked at him with a wide smile.
But of course, it must be the truth. I totally believe you. Definitely.
Sonny stared at her with his mouth wide open, not knowing what to say. Effie, meanwhile, looked around and innocently fluttered her eyelashes.
But Sonny, we have another problem.
Gritting his teeth in irritation, he snapped,
What is it?
She lingered for a few moments, then said teasingly,
There's only one bed. Ah, what a predicament. Whatever shall we do?
Sonny glared at her for a long time, then spat.
You take the damn bed. I'll sleep on the floor.
With that, he turned away and tried to take a deep breath. He was beginning to wonder why he agreed to take Effie in. He knew she was only teasing him, and that by getting flustered, he only made things worse. But he wasn't used to dealing with this kind of thing.
If she keeps this up, I'll never make it a week.
After Sonny calmed down a little and had time to think about it, he realized that things weren't as bad as he had thought. Yes, living this close to the rambunctious huntress was a very special kind of trial, especially due to how much joy she seemed to derive from tormenting him. But there was one redeeming aspect to all of this. Sonny was a nocturnal creature. He didn't have to sleep on the cold floor or interact with the vigorous huntress that much, because he would be asleep during the day and out hunting during the night. The window of time when they would both be awake and stuck in the hidden chamber together was not that large. More than that, Effie had brought enough food to satiate her unnatural hunger in that bottomless bag of hers, so he didn't even have to feed her. So hosting her was not going to be as bothersome as he had initially assumed. After showing the huntress around and enduring several more good-natured jabs, he finally had some time to himself. Finally sitting down in a remote corner of the chamber,
He closed his eyes and dove into the soul sea. As always, the tranquil sea met him with calming darkness and peaceful silence. Not paying any attention to motionless shadows that stood at the edge of the visible part of it, not even to gaunt and pitiful Harper, he walked over and stood beneath the black sun of his shadow core. Then, Sonny summoned the Stone Saint. "Hey there, darling. Guess what? I brought dinner." Before commanding the memories he had purchased with the help of Kai down, he quickly glanced at the runes surrounding the taciturn monster. Shadow, Stone Saint. Shadow rank, awakened. Shadow class, monster. Shadow attributes, Battlemaster, Stalwart, Spark of Divinity. So far, everything was exactly as he had expected. He returned his attention to the runes. Shadow fragments, 6 out of 200. Only 6 fragments, and the Stone Saint was already so strong. He couldn't wait to see his monster grow even more ferocious. Not wasting any more time, Sonny summoned the first memory, a strange sword with a stupid amount of useless gems embedded into its blade for some idiotic reason, and handed it to the Stone Saint. She took the sword without showing any emotion and ruthlessly shattered it with her gauntlets. The voice of the nightmare spell resounded. "Your memory has been destroyed." Sonny made a face. "Why, thank you, spell. I wouldn't have guessed it if it weren't for you. So helpful." 2 torrents of ethereal sparks entered the Stone Saint's body and were absorbed by the dark embers burning in the depths of the living shadow that hid in her body. The spell responded as expected. "Stone Saint has grown stronger." Sonny grinned and glanced at the runes again. Shadow fragments, 7 out of 200. Satisfied, Sonny summoned the next memory. The process repeated itself. "Stone Saint has grown stronger. Stone Saint has grown stronger. Stone Saint has grown stronger." As the number of shadow fragments saturating the core remnants inside his pet monster grew, Sonny's mood continued improving. This was the best feeling ever. He stared at the runes, watching the shadow fragments climb up and up as he fed memories to the Stone Saint. Finally, after sacrificing his 9th memory, the runes read, "Shadow fragments, 20 out of 200. The Stone Saint looked considerably stronger already. Remembering the changes that happened to his own body after his first few kills, Sonny could more or less gauge how much her condition had improved. The increment wasn't really that substantial, but in battle, the tiniest advantage could often decide everything, especially considering that it was going to be doubled by the augmenting effect of his indispensable but impudent shadow. All of this was just a prelude anyway. The main event was yet to come. Full of anticipation, Sonny called the onyx armor down. If his calculations were correct, this relic alone should give the Stone Saint 12 shadow fragments, almost as much as the 9 lesser memories combined. The jet black suit of ancient plate armor appeared in the air in front of him. Surrounded by the lightless vastness of the silent sea, the feeling of dark grace it emanated was even more pronounced. Sonny clicked his tongue. What a beauty. It was almost a shame to destroy it. Almost. Slightly reluctant to part with the ancient armor yet, Sonny read the runes describing it. Memory, old. Memory rank, unknown. Memory tier, unknown. Stev was right. Even the spell couldn't make sense of the damaged memory. Still, Sonny read on, hoping to find some hint. Memory type, unknown. Memory description, Prit, First, Army, Shed, Own. Memory enchantments, unknown. Many of the runes were missing, and those that did appear refused to coalesce into any sort of comprehensible words. However, Sonny did notice a few of the strange runes that made his head hurt, the same ones present whenever the spell mentioned the mysterious unknown. Sonny took it as confirmation of his earlier suspicions. The armor was clearly connected to the same tribe of nightmare creatures
that the stone saint had belonged to before becoming a shadow. The origin of the strange living statues was tied to the unknown, so it was logical to assume that the onyx armor had something to do with them too. Well, no matter. He knew that this memory was severely damaged when he bought it. Sonny was never planning on using it anyway, only feeding it to the saint. Time for dessert. With a wide smile, he pushed the beautiful black armor to the stone monster. However, the smile soon froze on his face, because the stone saint did not move to take and shatter the armor as she did with all the other memories. Instead, she simply turned her head and looked at it. The hue of the crimson flames burning in her ruby eyes ever so slightly changed. It was almost as though they were filled with the tiniest shadow of sorrow. Come on, eat it. But no matter how much he tried to get the stone saint to destroy the armor, she refused. The living statue just stood there and did nothing. After a while, disappointed, Sonny stared at the onyx armor and sighed. Well, serves him right. To be honest, he had a slight inkling that this would happen. Nevertheless, Sonny had decided to buy the armor anyway. It's not every day that you stumble upon a Tier 6 fallen memory, even if it's damaged beyond your ability to repair. Perhaps he would don the armor one day, if Nephis actually managed to open the path to the gateway and he somehow found himself among those lucky few to reach it alive and become awakened. Until then, the awesome black armor was pretty much useless. With a deep frown, he left the Soul Sea and summoned it into existence. Soon the armor appeared on the floor of the hidden chamber. Effie looked at it with interest. Wow, what is this? Sonny lingered for a long time. Decoration, I guess. The huntress raised her eyebrows. Really? Well, what are you staring at me for? He gritted his teeth. A few awkward moments later, Sonny muttered, can you help me move it? It's too heavy for me to lift. Effie shot him a dirty look. Sonny had spent a decent amount on this memory, and it was too heavy for him to even lift. Still, he was determined not to let all those resources go to waste. One way or another, he was going to learn the truth behind the black armor. Sonny closed his eyes and savored the feeling of night in the cursed city. In many ways, this place felt like home to him. He had left Effie back at the cathedral and set out on a hunt. The nightmare spell intoned, "Your shadow grows stronger." With a rather unpleasant noise, the monster's head fell. Sonny indifferently bent his arm and wiped the midnight shard on the sleeve of his armor, watching as the massive body slowly toppled over. Standing on the other side of it, the stone saint simply flourished her sword in and stopped it abruptly mid-swing, sending every drop of blood flying to the ground. Then, she just stood there, absolutely still, pretending to be a statue. Sonny sighed. That's a cool trick. I should learn it. Honestly, cleaning his blade on the puppeteer's shroud was not very fair to the Tier 5 armor. He felt guilty. He shot a look towards the saint. Watch my back. With the taciturn echo observing the surroundings, he summoned the prowling thorn and used it to recover the soul shard from the carcass. This was the fourth nightmare creature Sonny had killed that night. With the help of the stone saint, his hunts were becoming much easier than before, not even mentioning the fact that the stone saint was as powerful as most of his marks. The mere fact that he had a partner to draw the enemy's attention away changed a lot of things. Sonny was somewhat capable of engaging in direct battle with these abominations, but preferred to avoid it. His way of doing things was to spring from the shadows and, ideally, kill the enemy with a single strike. If everything went smoothly, the prey would never even see its killer. Of course, such a hunting method required a lot of cunning, patience, and preparation. He had to observe the enemy for a long time to learn its behavior and weaknesses. The confrontation itself took just a few seconds, but only because days had been spent time in advance to make that immediate resolution possible. After hunting in that meticulous way for 3 months, Sonny felt strange simply overpowering the monsters with brute force. The combination of Stone Saint's indomitable defense and his swift blade was nothing short of miraculous. It was almost like fighting side by side with Nephis. Almost. With a sigh, Sonny threw the soul shards into his rucksack and stood up. He was facing a problem that he had never expected to face. It was honestly rather bizarre. He was running out of monsters to kill. Awakened nightmare creatures weren't that abundant in the Dark City to begin with, let alone those whom he had already tracked, studied, and felt confident attacking. After tonight's massacre, pretty much every one of them was dead. Sonny had cleaned the house. But he was so much stronger now, so much more dangerous. With the help of the Stone Saint, maybe there was no need to be so cautious. No, this is how you get yourself killed. This was a dangerous mindset. Despite his recent growth, Sonny was still in no way the apex predator in the ruins. He was the opposite of that. Of all the creatures stalking these streets, he was the weakest. Pride is the gravest of all sins. Next thing you know, you'll be trying to hunt the fallen ones. Sonny would perhaps survive a confrontation with a fallen beast. Maybe. But defeating one was a whole other conversation. And if he had the misfortune to stumble on something of a higher class, his chances of making it out alive would not be very high. He could start investigating one of the awakened creatures that he knew of, or simply go home. However, something was bothering Sonny. There was this feeling in his head that he had a seed of an idea, but then got distracted and failed to fully form it. What was I thinking about just now? Whether or not to hunt again tonight. How powerful he had become with the help of the shadow. How it was not very practical to wipe the blood with the sleeve of the puppeteer's shroud. Oh, right. Back when he saw the Stone Saint shake off the blood of her sword, he thought that this would be a cool trick to learn. At that moment, he got a feeling that he was onto something. I should learn it. I should learn it. Suddenly, Sonny's eyes became bright. If he could learn this trick from the Stone Saint, what else would he be able to learn from her? This shadow of his had an attribute called Battle Master, which meant that she was proficient in all forms of combat. Why use her as just an instrument when instead he could learn from her? Was there a better teacher for someone like him? The answer was no. With his technique stagnating because of the lack of guidance, there was no one better than the masterful Stone Saint to learn from. Suddenly excited, Sonny summoned the taciturn monster back into his shadow and headed home. By the time he returned to his hidden lair, Effie was already awake. Sitting on the bed, she was lazily staring at the ceiling and whistling a cheerful tune. She sat up when Sonny returned. Oh, you're back. Good hunt? Instead of answering, Sonny walked over to his chest, glanced at the huntress with suspicion, and opened it. Then he poured the contents of his rucksack inside. 7 soul shards fell on the pile, which was sadly visibly diminished because of his recent expenses. It was still nothing to scoff at, though. Effie whistled. 7? How many heads is that? Sonny closed the chest and sat on it. 4. 3 monsters and 1 beast. Effie blinked a bit stunned. 3 monsters? How did you manage to kill 3 monsters in one night? He hesitated, then sighed. Trying to hide the existence of the Stone Saint would be very bothersome, especially if he was going to venture on an expedition with Neff's cohort. Out there in the labyrinth, chances were that none of them would be able to hold back to hide their aces. That was if he was going to agree to it, of course. Anyway, there would be not much harm in revealing her now. Or rather, the benefits outweighed it. I'll show you. Just don't freak out. Effie giggled. I'm pretty sure that nothing you're capable of showing can freak me out. Ignoring her teasing tone, Sonny glared at the huntress. and summoned the saint out of his sea of soul. Immediately, 2 crimson flames ignited in the depths of his shadow. A moment later, the menacing stone knight stepped from it on the floor of the hidden chamber and turned her head to Effie. Effie recoiled.
What? What the hell is that?
The giant instinctively summoned her spear, and Sunny leapt between the 2 fearsome warriors. The mighty huntress stared at the stone saint, her fingers tightening around the hilt of her spear. Her beautiful hazel eyes were full of tension and dark anticipation. The contrast between that fierce pose and the fact that she was still comfortably wrapped in a blanket was so funny that Sunny couldn't help but snicker. He smirked.
Gee, relax. Haven't you seen an echo before?
Effie blinked.
That thing is yours? Wait, you got an echo?
He gave her a nod and gestured at the stone saint.
Yes, I did. Meet Saint. Ain't she a beauty?
The huntress stared at the taciturn creature and then dismissed her weapon. Effie scowled at Sunny with outrage.
You lucky bastard. You do know that I haven't even caught a sniff of an echo after 3 years in this pit. How dare you get one before me, huh?
Sunny laughed.
Actually, this was my second echo. The first one got killed in the labyrinth.
Effie glared at him for a long time, then shook her head with an expression of utter dejection. Finally, she turned to the shadow and studied her.
Wait, is she what I think she is?
Sunny nodded. Yeah. The huntress finally shed the blanket and walked barefoot toward the stone saint. She studied her from all angles.
How the hell did you manage to kill one of those things and survive?
Sunny, who had found himself involuntarily studying Effie from all angles as well, blinked a couple of times and shrugged.
Actually, it got wiped out by a group of fallen. There was an epic clash, to say the least. I just happened to be there in time to finish one off. And here we are.
Effie stared at the shadow with admiration.
What class is she?
Sunny smiled.
Awakened monster, but I watched her kill 2 fallen beasts, so I'd say she's an elite among her peers. Anyway, you can see how it's not impossible to hunt 3 monsters in one night with her by my side. I studied them in advance, of course. That's why we were so fast in dealing with them.
The huntress crossed her arms, thought for a bit, and then gave Sunny a strange look.
Why are you showing her to me? With how paranoid you are, I'd expect you to keep such a treasure hidden.
He lingered for a moment.
With what I have planned, showing her to you is sort of a requirement.
Effie grew silent, then gave him a mischievous smile.
Sorry to disappoint. Don't get me wrong, I'm up for all kinds of fun. But Sunny, nightmare creatures is where I draw the line.
He frowned, not quite getting what she was talking about. Then his eyes widened.
What? What kind of degenerate are you? Training. I wanted to use her for training.
The unruly huntress blinked innocently.
Training? Sunny, there's nothing wrong with being a bit inexperienced at your age. In fact, it's quite charming. You don't need to resort to this kind of thing, you know. Who are you calling inexperienced? I'm plenty experienced. Wait, crap. What are you even talking about?
Dying from laughter, Effie left Sunny to fume with outrage and walked over to the makeshift kitchen while shaking her head. Soon the tantalizing smell of roasting meat filled the air. Sunny thought to himself, I'm going to kill her. Should I kill her? It's going to be pure self-defense anyway. A week of this would be the death of me. With a sigh, he tried very hard to calm down. When his thoughts returned to their usual cadence, Sunny stood in front of the stone saint and slowly exhaled. It was time to learn. To begin his new training regime, Sunny headed outside onto the street. He considered summoning his shadow and using it to augment his power, but decided it was best to practice in his natural state. Even though he knew that this was going to bring him a lot of pain in the future, he was adamant about his choice. There were several reasons why he wanted to face his pet monster with his own physical ability and nothing else. The first and most simple reason was that Sonny knew that the shadow would not always be there when he needed it. Just like during the battle against the Spire Messenger when it had been away scouting. Circumstances in which he was going to have to rely on nothing but his own prowess were bound to happen. Not to mention that it had been his own reflexes and not the shadow that saved him from being cut in two by the Black Knight. The second reason was less evident. It had to do with the existing hierarchy of power in the Dark City. At the very top, there was the Fallen. Beneath them, those creatures that were merely awakened. And at the very bottom, sleepers. Any fight that a human could face in that cursed place was going to be against an overwhelming force. With time, Sonny had adjusted to this reality and was able, these days, to face the lower classes of awakened abominations on almost equal terms. With the help of the shadow, he was still weaker, but not by that much. However, deep down, he knew that sooner or later, he would be forced to fight against fallen enemies, and he was also almost sure that he would have to cross swords with humans that had saturated their cores to the brim with soul essence, and were thus much stronger than him. For that reason, his experience hunting monsters who were not much stronger than his augmented self was actually an impediment. It dulled his edge and made him forget what it meant to struggle against an enemy who was leagues above him. The knowledge and mindset that he desperately needed to retain to have a chance of surviving the future. He had to keep himself humble. And lastly, there was one truth that he had learned during these 6 months on the Forgotten Shore, and it was that nothing was more beneficial to one's growth than fighting against a superior opponent, especially if that fight ended in your loss. One defeat taught a person more than a dozen victories against weaker enemies. The problem was that in this cursed place, any defeat meant death. So Sonny had little experience losing to someone. From start to finish, he tasted loss only 3 times. Once in a battle against the Carapace Centurion, once when he had faced Nephis under the branches of the Soul Tree, and once in this very cathedral when the Black Knight's sword had sliced his stomach open. Each of those defeats taught him more than anything else did. So having the opportunity to fight with a monster who was much more powerful than him and yet had no desire to kill him was an extremely rare and precious opportunity. That's why Sonny steeled himself and let the shadow rest on the floor while he faced the Stone Saint. Taking a deep breath, he summoned the Midnight Shard, assumed a defensive stance, and looked at the menacing Stone Knight right in the eyes. "Attack me!" Not wasting even a second, she did just as she was told. Sonny's eyes went wide as the behemoth charged at him. Maybe this was a mistake. The Stone Saint attacked with the vicious strength of a true monster. Sonny knew perfectly well that his strength was not enough to block her sword. He desperately moved the Midnight Shard to deflect the strike to the side. The countless hours of practice and hundreds of thousands of times he had repeated his fighting forms had not been in vain. Sonny's body moved with lightning speed, placing the blade in the path of the Stone Saint's weapon at just the right angle. Feeling the impact reverberate in his bones, Sonny gasped from the pain and stood his ground. Guided by the Midnight Shard, the Echo's sword glided to the side and missed his body by a wide margin. However, before Sonny had time to congratulate himself, the Saint simply continued moving forward and slammed into him. Being hit by her shield felt like crashing into a stone wall at high speed. Flying back, Sonny impacted against an actual wall and rolled to the floor. A small yelp escaped from his lips. "Ah!" Effie stood on the sidelines of the battle. She winced and glanced at Sonny. "Sonny, you still alive?" He weakly raised a hand and brought his thumb and index finger together in the shape of a circle. "Yeah," the huntress smiled. "Good. Don't die yet, all right? It's going to be really inconvenient for me to get back into the bedroom without your help." Sonny gritted his teeth. Surely she had to care about more than that. He reminded himself that Effie loved to tease him. His voice was dry.
I'll try my best not to inconvenience you."
Slowly rising to his feet, he staggered and had to lean on the wall for balance. The stone saint returned to her spot and stood there indifferently, not paying any attention to his furious glare. With a heavy sigh, Sunny walked back to stand in front of her and raised the midnight shard.
Again!
Over the next few days, Sunny continued to train with the stone saint. He often wondered if he had gone mad. Otherwise, why would he willingly subject himself to this torture? His life now consisted of only 3 things: spending time with Effie, practicing with the stone saint, and exploring the cursed ruins. Out of the 3, the time he was spending in the deadly maze of the Dark City was by far the least dreadful. He even found himself enjoying it a great deal. Once you begin thinking about a cursed ancient ruin teeming with abominable monsters as a comfortable place, you should start thinking about your life choices. And yet, Sunny knew that he was on the right track. Painful as they were, his training sessions with the menacing stone saint had turned out to be even more advantageous than he imagined. Every bruise, every cut, every drop of blood that he spilled was making him stronger. After a long period of stagnation, his technique was finally improving again, and it was doing so with noticeable speed. The best thing about it was that he had not even scratched the surface of the immense didactic potential of the Echo's Battlemaster attribute. For someone like him, who had never received a formal education in combat, it was simply a boon. It was a hidden treasure. Back when he had observed the Stone Saint in the fight against the Carapace Centurion, he had noted her distinct battle style. The taciturn creature fought with the firmness of stone, combining flawless defense with devastating offense. Each action was efficient and perfectly calculated, with blocks, dodges, and deflections leading into deadly riposts. It was solid, indomitable, and inevitable. However, this was not the only battle style that the Stone Saint was perfectly proficient in. Rather, it was something that she used based on her current weapons and opponent. Back when she originally fought against 2 harrowing fallen beasts, her style was reckless and brutal, disregarding any form of defense in favor of an endless onslaught of vicious attacks. Although there were some foundational similarities between them, these 2 techniques were vastly different. It seemed as though she was able to switch between countless styles to suit the situation. Sunny couldn't wish for a better sparring partner. His own style, or rather the kernel of one that had been given him by Nephis, was flowing and unpredictable. It focused on adaptability and making it impossible for the enemy to anticipate your next move. The more Sunny fought against the Stone Saint, the more he realized how extraordinary it was. However, it didn't mean that this style couldn't be improved. Sunny suspected that it was designed to be able to incorporate various elements from other sources. If so, it was a perfect foundational style to learn. All of this made him wonder where this strange style had come from and if Changing Star had taught him its basics for a reason. In any case, he was determined to make sense of it, improve his mastery of the things he had already learned, and begin to incorporate elements of Stone Saint's stark technique into his own. However, this was easier said than done. At first, fighting against the menacing Echo appeared to be almost impossible. Every time he gave her the command to attack, he would inevitably end up on the floor in mere moments, groaning and consumed with pain. His whole body was bruised black and hurting terribly. If not for the tenacious enhancement of the blood weave, Sunny did not know if he would have been able to continue, or at least continue at an acceptable rate. With its help, however, the speed of his recovery was considerably faster. It was almost inhuman. Because of that, he was able to train more intensely and for longer periods. Just as he had expected, every defeat taught him something new. Losing to a superior opponent was the best way to improve indeed. Back in the real world, many people were foolishly obsessed with their pride and lived for nothing but to achieve victories against others. Not Sunny, though. He was perfectly content with losing time after time as long as he continued to become stronger with each loss. The only person he wanted to defeat was the version of himself from the last fight, over and over again. Just like that, he had slowly begun to put up at least some resistance to the Stone Saint. At first, he was happy with being able to deflect one attack, then two, then several. Before too long, he stopped counting the number of attacks and started counting the number of seconds he remained on his feet. It was just a couple at first, then 4 or 5, then a dozen. Finally, he was able to fight with the menacing Stone Knight for vast amounts of time, sometimes even up to a minute. Even Effie seemed to be impressed. She usually paid little attention to his training, but after some time, Sonny noticed her glancing in his direction more and more. At first, he thought that the unruly huntress simply enjoyed watching him suffer in his suffering. But then he realized that she was trying to learn from his mistakes too. Sonny didn't mind. His movements slowly became more confident, purposeful, and precise. His body, while damaged and bruised, was brimming with strength and agility. He was maturing. It was only when his spars with the Stone Saint turned less one-sided that Sonny noticed something strange, and when he did, everything changed. It took Sonny a long time to perceive the anomaly for several reasons. To begin with, it was so subtle that it was almost impossible to notice. His whole mind was concentrated on the thoughts of battle technique and styles, and still, he only saw it by accident. The second reason had to do with his decision to face the Stone Saint without the augmentation of his aspect ability. Because of it, the shadow had nothing to do. It returned to acting as a proper shadow and obediently repeated his every movement while he fought. The last reason was Effie, or, more specifically, the fact that she had brought a source of light into the hidden lair, making the shadow actually visible. Because of this unlikely combination of events, Sonny was able to see it. He was in the middle of a fierce battle against the Stone Saint, sweat and blood trickling down his battered body. The clamor of swords clashing against each other permeated the chamber, drowning the raspy sound of his laborious breathing. Deflecting another blow, Sonny swiftly crouched and let the edge of the creature's shield whistle through the air above his head. His rather clumsy attempt to imitate one of the Stone Saint's explosive ripostes was easily blocked, and the two of them continued the duel. This time, it lasted for an especially long time. Sonny was pretty sure that he had already withstood the oppressive assault of the monster for 1.5 minutes. If true, this was a personal best, and he still pressed on, determination fueling his steps. After countless spars like this, he would sometimes enter a special state of flow. In it, his mind was calm and clear, operating at a tremendous speed. When Sonny entered this state, his attention became simultaneously sharp, like a blade, and strangely unfocused. Normally, he would have to concentrate on specific details, like watching the enemy's footwork to predict where the next blow would come from. Sonny was even able to split his mind in two, with one part of it absorbing the information that came through his eyes, while the other part was preoccupied with what the shadow saw. In this way, he could either concentrate on two enemies at the same time, or have a full view of his surroundings so that no one could sneak up on him from behind. However, with his attention not focused on anything, he was somehow capable of perceiving everything. Every detail, be it the enemy's footwork, the direction of their gaze, or the slight change in the environment, simply became a part of the all-encompassing tapestry that he perceived as a whole. Needless to say, this ability to see everything simultaneously and think with sufficient speed to act on it dramatically boosted his combat performance. It was in concert with, and felt like a natural continuation of, the strange sense of clarity that he had achieved after almost dying in the battle against the first Carapace Centurion. Right then, Sonny entered this state of flow once again. After a few more exchanges, he suddenly noticed that there was something strange about his shadow. Instinctively, he paid it more attention while continuing to fight. It was then that he realized that his shadow's movements well, almost exactly like his, were actually not the same. There was a very slight, almost imperceptible difference. It didn't make any sense. His shadow should be tied to him, mirroring him, matching him. But something was different. But he could feel something vast and profound hiding in this tiny divergence. Something about its motion felt like it held the key to a problem that had been nagging at Sonny for weeks. Stunned, he slowed down and stared at the shadow.
What did I just see?
Sonny was so stunned, in fact, that for a moment, he completely forgot where he was. In the next second, the rim of the Stone Saint's shield hit him in the chest, sending him flying at the wall once again. Sonny crashed into the cold stones, fell to the floor, and weakly groaned. Oh, that one hurt. However, he immediately forgot about the pain. Sitting up, Sonny stared at his shadow with wide eyes.
This is...
What did he see? The shadow's movements, while exactly like his own, were also different. It was as though a light ignited in his head, or rather became drowned in shadows. Sonny suddenly had an epiphany. This revelation was so astonishing that he almost cried out loud. The divergence between him and his shadow was not random, nor was it chaotic. It was consistent and harmonious, hinting at a deeper meaning. And that meaning was that his shadow had a battle style of its own. Sonny only saw a glimpse of it through the slight discrepancy in their movements. If someone didn't know the shadow as well as he did, they would never notice anything. Even he only saw it by accident. What he saw wasn't enough to discern anything about that battle style except for the fact that it existed. He was also able to sense its essence. It was flowing and insidious, shapeless and ever-changing, like the shadow itself. This description was so close to its nature that Sonny felt it was safe to assume that the movements of the battle style were not something the shadow performed on purpose, but rather a manifestation of its innate quality. Did his shadow have a battle art fused into its very being?
It is an invaluable helper,
he whispered. If this was true, then Sonny had just found the answer to the question that had been tormenting him for the last few days. While the battle style entrusted to him by Nephis was versatile and deadly, and the technique of the Stone Saint was indomitable and oppressive, they were not his own. No matter how much he practiced them, he felt that there was something missing. Individuality. Only by creating a style of his own would Sonny be able to become equal to the best fighters out there. Until then, he would always be just an imitator. Of course, creating a true battle style was not something that a novice like him was capable of doing. More than that, there was a difference between knowing that the mysterious shadow style existed and actually understanding what it was. But still, it was a beginning. If he learned the secret hiding inside his shadow and combined it with the flowing adaptability of his current style, what would the result be? Standing up, Sonny spat a mouthful of blood, wiped the sweat off his brow, and walked over to his tormentor, the Stone Saint. Raising the midnight shard, he gritted his teeth. Again. Soon, the clangor of swords resounded in the hidden chamber once more. Only this time, Sonny paid close attention to his shadow. This time, he was going to let it teach him. Trying to learn the secrets of the shadow was a very slow process. Sonny could only see glimpses of the mysterious battle style while fighting against the Stone Saint, and doing so usually required his full attention. As long as he wasn't fully concentrated on his opponent, their clashes ended in mere seconds, making it so that there was nothing to observe. But when he concentrated on the battle at hand, he couldn't really pay any attention to the shadow, which in turn eliminated the possibility of observing it. Finding the right balance between the two tasks was not easy, not to mention painful. Every time he failed, a new bruise appeared on his body. And yet,
There was progress. Although Sonny was still unable to peer into the depths of the battle art, he was slowly beginning to get a feel for it. His shadow was more treacherous, fluid, and malleable than he was. There was a hint of a graceful cadence to its movements that was lacking in his. It was as though it was dancing, a shadow dance. Frustrated by the lack of a breakthrough, Sonny wanted to push himself harder, but had to stop himself. Even considering the tenacious effects of the blood weave, his training regimen had already brought his body to its limits. He needed to preserve its condition if he was going to join Nephis on her long expedition. Unless he wanted to enter the labyrinth while crippled with exhaustion and injuries, of course. What Sonny failed to realize due to the lack of experience and the fact that he had been mostly self-taught was that this accomplishment had already made him an outlier as far as humans went. Most novices weren't even able to master the superficial aspects of different battle styles, let alone recognize their fundamental traits for what they were. They simply followed the rules without understanding them, regarding styles as something indubitable and rigid. Only the most experienced fighters had enough understanding of the essence of a battle art to attempt to manipulate it, so he was already far ahead of the curve. But since Sonny never had a proper mentor, he had no idea that he was trying to accomplish something that an average human would never be able to do. His only point of reference was Nephis, who was an absolute outlier herself. If renowned masters of combat arts were to learn that a self-taught youth from the outskirts had managed to dismantle two incredibly complex battle styles into basic elements and assemble them to better suit his tastes, while also trying to learn a third one from his shadow, they would be stunned. However, Sonny just thought that he was unsuccessful and incredibly slow. Maybe I'm just stupid. Picking himself up from the floor, Sonny sighed and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Then he glanced at the stone saint and leaned on the wall. You're done for today? Effie was nearby, dying from boredom. Watching Sonny torture himself was her only way to entertain herself in this dark room. Well, that and torturing him herself, among other things. Whatever. He gave her a tired nod. Yeah, I think so. It's already dusk, so I'll rest for a bit and go out. The huntress narrowed her eyes. By the way, I wanted to ask, how do you even know what time of day it is? There's no windows here, and we can't hear the sea yet. He glanced at her with a gloomy expression and reluctantly answered. The shadow of the Crimson Spire. I can feel it. Effie blinked a couple of times, then shrugged. Ah, I see. Anyway, since you're done, can I have a turn with your girlfriend? Sonny gritted his teeth and answered without even thinking. She's not my girlfriend. Only then did he realize what Effie was asking. She had never shown interest in sparring with the Stone Saint before. Why now? Not that it mattered. And no, you can't. The huntress tilted her head. What? Why? Sonny scoffed. Do I need to explain it? It's too dangerous. What if something happens to you? Effie giggled. So let me get this straight. You can train with her all day every day, but you think that for me she's too tough? He shook his head. Don't misunderstand. It's just that if something happens to me, the worst outcome is that I die. If something happens to you, however, I'm going to get killed by Nephis. The result is the same, but one way is vastly better than the other. Get it? She crossed her arms. Oh, come on. I just want to see which one of us is stronger. Sonny scowled. No way. Don't even think about it. Effie silently glared at him. I said no, okay? There's no way I'm letting you fight her. The huntress grinned. All right. That's not going to be a problem. A few minutes later, Sonny was staring at the scene in front of him in disbelief. How did it come to this? Leaning over the opulent wooden table stood Effie and the Stone Saint. The elbows of her right hands rested on the table, while their palms were pressed against each other. The shadow was taciturn and indifferent, while the huntress was full of enthusiasm. They were preparing to arm wrestle.
Effie glanced at him and grinned. "Wanna bet who's going to win? If I overpower your girlfriend, you'll owe me a shard. No, 10 shards." Sonny sighed.
"What if you lose?"
The unruly huntress winked at him. Sonny glared.
"You know what? I don't even want to know. I don't gamble, so forget about it."
Effie sighed. "So boring. Anyway, let's do this." She gripped the Stone Saint's hand and prepared to wrestle.
"Let's go."
Instantly, both the Stone Saint and the Huntress tried to bring the opponent's arm down. The table groaned, subjected to a crushing amount of pressure. For a moment, it seemed that the Stone Saint was on the losing side, but in the end, her hand only moved by a millimeter. The monster stared at the young woman with her ruby eyes, her face hidden behind the visor of the helmet. There was no emotion in her gaze. Effie's hazel eyes, on the contrary, were full of delight. There was a relaxed smile frozen on her face. However, Sonny could see that she was putting her all into this struggle. The lean muscles tautened under the olive skin of her back. Her whole body was like a loaded spring, brimming with strength and overwhelming power. And yet, the saint's hand did not move. It seemed as though neither of them could overpower the other.
I wonder who will give up first.
Second after second passed in silence, but nothing changed. Both Effie and the Stone Saint were persisting, not giving up even a tiny bit of ground. The amount of strength they were exerting to keep this volatile balance made Sonny sweat a little.
They're both monsters.
In the end, the first one to give up was the table. Not able to withstand the pressure anymore, it simply exploded. Covering his face to protect it from the flying splinters, Sonny froze for a moment, then stared at the pile of tiny debris. A feeling of deep sorrow and indignation pierced his heart.
"Aw, man! My table!"
And just like that, a week had passed. Miraculously, Sonny had survived. Even more miraculously, he had somehow managed not to kill Effie, which was a big accomplishment in and of itself. In fact, by the end of it, their forced cohabitation had turned rather pleasant. They were both solitary hunters after all. There was an instinctive understanding between the two of them. His overall combat skill and particularly comprehension of both his battle style and that of the Stone Saint had improved by leaps and bounds. He felt faster, stronger, and better prepared to face the horrors of the dream realm. Although he had yet to reach the same level of physical power that he had possessed before sacrificing 100 shadow fragments to create the Shadow Saint, Sonny felt that the current him was still a far deadlier opponent, which was good, considering how fast the grim future was approaching. Currently, Sonny and Effie were sitting on the support beam of the main hall of the cathedral, looking down from the head-spinning height. Far below and away from them, the Black Knight walked through the patches of light and darkness, continuing his never-ending patrol. Effie scowled, then whispered,
"So, this is the bastard?"
Sonny gave her a gloomy nod.
"Yeah, in the flesh.
Or whatever he has instead of it." The unruly huntress gave him a long look.
"How the hell did you manage to live through a fight with that fiend?"
He grimaced.
"Barely. Also, calling it a fight is giving me too much credit. I just got myself gutted and crawled outside. He never leaves the cathedral, so I got away."
She shivered.
"Are you sure that he won't hear us?"
Sonny pointed down.
"As long as he doesn't walk past that column, and as long as we're not too loud and keep our voice down, we're safe. Trust me, I've been studying that bastard for 2 whole months."
Effie suddenly grinned.
"So, how loud are we talking about? Because I can promise to."
Sonny rolled his eyes.
"Can you stop? We're in a temple, for God's sake."
He didn't need to hear the end of the phrase to know that it was going to be highly suggestive and very inappropriate. She quietly giggled.
Fine.
After a couple of minutes passed in silence, Sonny looked down and saw that the pale light of dawn was slowly turning brighter. It was almost time for the two of them to leave the cathedral. He had yet to come to a final decision regarding Nephis's request. Depending on his choice, he and Effie would, perhaps, never see each other again. Sonny quietly sighed. Then, turning to the huntress, he said, "Hey, Effie, can I ask you something?" She looked at him with a silent question in her eyes and shrugged. "Sure. Go ahead, doofus." Sonny hesitated, feeling the somber mood of the situation. Then, looking away, he said, "Tell me honestly, were you dropped on your head a lot when you were a kid?" Effie blinked a couple of times, then suddenly pressed both hands against her mouth to suppress a laugh. In the process, she almost fell from the support beam. "Heavens, Sonny. Do you want me to laugh out loud and get us both killed? What's up with that question?" "No, I was not." He looked at her with a dubious expression. "Then why are you so damn cheerful all the time? It's not normal. You're like a crazy person. And I know a thing or two about that, mind you." The huntress smiled. "Ah, that." Then she shrugged. Sonny waited for the explanation, noticing an unfamiliar air of melancholy around the vigorous young woman. Her usual infectious vitality somehow felt lessened. "It's because I don't think that this place is as bad as all of you seem to believe. Everyone in this dark city is convinced that this is hell." She hesitated. "But to me, it's a paradise." Sonny glanced at her and frowned. "How so?" Effie sighed. "You wouldn't understand, but for some of us, the real world was more of a hell than the dream realm." Sonny turned away, thinking about his own life in the outskirts. The reason he was able to adapt so well to the ruthless terror of the nightmare spell was because, at its core, it wasn't that different from his reality. "Still, what kind of paradise is this?" A sad smile appeared on the young woman's face. "The only kind we deserve, I guess." Then she looked at Sonny and asked, "Say, Sonny, you're from the outskirts, right? So you didn't receive a lot of education, I bet?" He shook his head. She chuckled. "Well, not like it would have changed anything. The schools are basically propaganda camps anyway. They teach kids some useful stuff, but they don't teach any kind of critical thinking. You come out of there able to regurgitate facts and equations, but unable to ask questions and completely blind to the truth." Sonny raised an eyebrow. "The truth?" Effie gave him a nod. "The truth is that our world is dying. Well, not the world, really. Just the part of the ecosystem that we need to survive." Something moved in his memory. A year or so before Sonny was born, a whole continent was lost because a Category 5 gate had opened on the coast. But the huntress quickly overturned his expectations. "And I'm not talking about the nightmare spell. I'm talking about what we, humans, have done to our planet. There were more than 10 billion people on Earth a couple of 100 years ago. Did you know? But now, it's barely 3, and half of them only have food and shelter because of us awakened and the powers we possess, which were given to us by the spell." She wasn't wrong. Sonny remembered the poisonous, acrid air of the outskirts, the inhuman conditions in the underground factory where his mother had worked, the towering barriers that protected the city from the deadly winds of the wasteland outside. He knew, of course, that the planet was not in a good shape compared to the past, but he never really thought about it that much. To him, this was simply how life always worked. Effie shrugged. "Who knows how many of us would still be alive without the spell? I honestly don't know. But if you ask me, I think that one day in the future, more people will believe that this realm is a paradise, just like me." On that ominous note, she stood up and stretched her whole body, making Sonny hurriedly look away. "Damn, pure thoughts, Sonny."
Anyway, it's already morning. Time to meet up with the princess and the others. Let's go.
Soon, they were standing in front of the cathedral. The morning sun was slowly crawling through the sky, washing the ancient city in its pale light. Sunny and Effie did not have to wait long before Nephis and her companions appeared from the ruins. Sunny blinked. There was Changing Star herself, Castor, Cassia, and Kai. What the hell was he doing here? Once the four sleepers approached and greeted them, Sunny immediately stared at the beautiful young man.
Knight, why are you here, buddy?
The archer smiled. I'm very happy to see you too, Sunny, my friend. Lady Nephis has asked me to join her on this expedition, and after careful consideration, I've decided to agree. Sunny blinked a couple of times.
All right. I know that I'm crazy, but when did you lose your mind too?
Kai looked at him with a strange expression. Wait, crazy? What do you mean you're crazy? Sunny sighed.
Never mind.
Then he turned to Nephis.
About your request, I'm ready to join the expedition, but on one condition. I will not become a part of your cohort. Rather, you can provide sufficient compensation to acquire my services.
Nephis looked at him for a while, an inexorable expression on her face. Then she said in an even tone, Do you have something in mind? Sunny grinned.
As a matter of fact, I do. Behind us, you can see a magnificent ancient cathedral. Inside that cathedral lives a creature which is called the Black Knight. He's a fallen devil. In return for my help during the expedition, I want your help after it's concluded. Once we return,
he paused for a moment and then added,
I want you to help me kill it.
A dead silence fell on the small square. After a while, Castor finally spoke, an expression of subtle shock on his face. Sunny, did you perhaps misspeak? We're just sleepers. How are we supposed to kill the Black Knight? A nightmare creature of his rank and class? Sunny's grin widened. Then, with an immense feeling of vindication, he looked at Castor and said,
It's just a fallen devil.
The expressions on the faces of Castor, Effie, and Kai were simply priceless. Sunny had to stop himself from laughing out loud. His shadow, however, did not. Luckily, it had no vocal cords, so all it could do was hold its stomach and shudder silently. Sunny shot the shadow a look.
Hey, you, behave yourself.
Meanwhile, Nephis just looked at him, the corner of her mouth slightly curled upward. After a while, Castor was finally able to answer. Just a fallen devil? Did you say just? However, Changing Star interrupted him. Glancing at the cathedral, she simply shrugged and said, This is acceptable. Everyone became silent. They stared at Nephis with bewildered expressions. With some satisfaction, Sunny nodded and said,
Don't be so quick to judge. We won't be going into that battle unprepared. I spent months studying the bastard. I know his every ability, every trick, and every weakness. More than that, if you can't even handle someone like him, how are you going to challenge Gunlog? Isn't that what this expedition is all about?
Sunny debated for a long time whether he should demand that they attack the Black Knight now or after the expedition was over. In the end, he decided that they were all too weak to face the devil. For now. But after months spent in the labyrinth, things were bound to change. There were more nightmare creatures out there, and most of them were not impossible to kill. By the end of the expedition, every member of the cohort was going to have much more soul essence in their cores than they had now. They would also have a wider arsenal of memories at their disposal. More importantly, they would have time to hone and perfect their teamwork. If they wanted to have a chance in a fight against the Black Knight, this was the most important part. Nephis nodded. Sunny is right. It's not like it's impossible to kill a fallen creature. Both James and Trent had done so in the past, not to mention Gunlog himself. It just takes a lot of preparation and a little bit of luck. By the end of this, we should be able to take on a single devil and win, provided that we learn its secrets in advance. Sonny smiled.
Exactly. Oh, right. Speaking of preparations.
While everyone was looking at him with confusion, well, except Cassia, of course, he took the rucksack off his shoulders and placed it on the ground. Then he opened it, revealing the soft shine of numerous soul shards.
Welcome to Sonny's brilliant emporium. This here is around 50 soul shards, each of them of the awakened rank. Since we will be venturing into the labyrinth, I've decided to give you guys an opportunity to empower yourselves a bit before facing the terrible dangers of that ghastly place. Of course, I'll give you a family discount.
He had emptied his treasure chest before leaving the hidden chamber. Currently, all of his remaining shards were inside the rucksack. Of course, he hadn't done so out of the kindness of his heart. Sonny never had any money, and so, understandably, didn't know a lot about how to handle it. But one thing he did know was that rich folk never allowed their riches to sit idly. Even money had to work to create more money once it fell into the hands of the wealthy. In the language of rich people, this was called an investment. By investing his shards into the cohort, Sonny was increasing his own chances of making it back alive. No matter how hard he thought, he couldn't imagine a worthier cause. Plus, he wasn't going to just give the shards away for free.
The rules of the Emporium are simple. You give me memories, I give you shards. I don't care how powerful or useful the memories are. In fact, the worse the better. Any useless junk you have gathering dust in your soul sea will do. If you don't have any, no problem. You can just promise to give me a memory in the future once you receive one in the labyrinth.
He smiled at the members of Nephis's cohort.
Not bad, right? No need to thank me.
Kai stared at the shards, then raised his eyes and looked at Sonny. Sonny, buddy, please forgive my bluntness, but why do you need all these memories? What a good question, Sonny grinned.
You see, how should I put this? Let's just say that there's a beauty I know who just can't get enough of them, if you know what I mean.
He winked at the pretty archer. With a strange expression, Kai turned away and shook his head. However, after this performance, no one else asked any questions. In the end, Sonny was able to exchange his shards for 5 memories. Nephis distributed the shards between the 5 members of the cohort, with each of them getting 10. This was a boon equal to slaying 10 awakened beasts. After absorbing the shards, all 5 of them were going to receive a significant boost to their power. As far as deadly expeditions went, this was the best start possible. Without wasting any time, Nephis, Cassia, Effie, Kai, and Castor absorbed the soul essence from the shards. While they were busy doing that, Sonny silently dove into the soul sea and fed the memories he had received to the Stone Saint. Stone Saint has grown stronger. Stone Saint has grown stronger. Stone Saint has grown stronger. Satisfied, he summoned the runes and glanced at them. Shadow, Stone Saint. Shadow fragments, 27 out of 200. Then he looked at his own. Name, Sunless. True name, Lost from Light. Rank, Dreamer. Shadow Core, Dormant. Shadow fragments, 318 out of 1,000. Not bad. Looking south, he smiled darkly and wondered, how much would these numbers increase by the time he returned to the Dark City? It had to be by a lot. When everyone was done absorbing their shards and getting accustomed to the changes caused by the sudden influx of soul essence, the cohort was ready to move out. The 6 of them headed south, cautiously traversing the cursed city. Nephis was walking in the front of the party, Her stark black and white plate armor contrasted sharply against the gray stones of the ancient ruins. A step behind her and to the right was Castor, clad in a polished scale mail that glistened in the morning light like the skin of a silver dragon. To her left was tall and powerful Effie, clad in the archaic bronze armor with a white chiton beneath. A few steps away, wearing his elegant lamellar armor made out of burnished brown leather, walked Kai. On his back there was a quiver full of heavy arrows. Cassia was walking beside him, her light tunic and bright cloak just the same as before. However, now there was a sheath with a graceful rapier attached to her belt. At the very back, with an unhappy expression on his face, was a pale young man with messy black hair and a ragged light armor made out of dark gray fabric and black lusterless leather. He was periodically lowering his gaze and grimacing, as though unaccustomed to being in the sun. Of course, it was sunny. Their journey to the edges of the forgotten shore had begun. Sunny was walking at the back of the cohort, but his shadow was scouting ahead. Without it by his side, he was rather uncomfortable. I wonder if I can summon the Stone Saint while it is away. How have I never thought to check it out? Without his shadow, Sunny felt almost naked. At least he had other people with him, including 3 powerhouses, Nephis, Castor, and Effie. Come to think of it, he had never seen Kai in action. The beautiful archer didn't look like someone extremely dangerous. But Sunny wasn't deceived. Weak people did not survive on the Forgotten Shore for years, especially not if their aspect ability made them the perfect person to venture outside the Dark City. With his unique aspect ability, Kai had to fight against the type of terrifying creatures that Sunny knew very little about, too. The flying abominations that lived in the clouds, like the Spire Messengers. Scary. Speaking of Kai, Sunny hastened his steps and caught up with the charming young man. Glancing at Cassia, who did not seem like she wanted to say anything to him, he frowned for a moment and then turned to Kai. Hey there, Knight. How's life? The archer looked at him with a friendly smile. Oh, hey. Good, I guess. I mean, the weather is nice. Sunny blinked a couple of times. The weather was never nice on the Forgotten Shore. It was either too cold, too damp, or too hot. Honestly, he even missed the Black Mountains sometimes. At least it was consistent. Not one to make polite talk, Sunny went straight to the question he really wanted to ask. So really, what are you doing here? Kai glanced at him with a bit of confusion. What do you mean? Sunny sighed. From what you told me, your life in the castle was nothing short of peaceful. You have enough shards to stay there for a long time. Everyone likes you, and even the host treats you nicely because of how useful your ability is. Why would you risk it all to go with us into the labyrinth? The beautiful archer lingered for a bit. Well, actually, I landed in a bit of trouble, I think. The deaths of those guards who locked me in the well are being used to frame Effie, are they not? Well, what if someone knows that I am connected to their disappearance? Won't I be in danger? Sunny thought about it for a bit, then reluctantly agreed. Makes sense, but won't the danger you face in this expedition be much worse than the one you are escaping from? Kai smiled. It certainly will, but Sunny, there is something else that you failed to consider. Sunny frowned. What's that? Please don't tell me that you became one of Nephis's converts. The charming young man chuckled. Converts? No, I don't think so. At least, not in the way that you think. He was silent for a long time, then sighed. Actually, I don't think that many people see things clearly, but really it's not that hard to understand. Turning to Sunny with a somber expression on his usually carefree face, Kai suddenly asked, I came to the Forgotten Shore 31 months ago. Do you know how many of us reached the Dark City that year? Sonny shook his head. The archer grimaced. Almost 400. And do you know how many are still alive? Less than 2. He was silent for a while, which means that in just 2 years, more than half of us perished. People die all the time in the Dark City, you see. The castle may seem safe, but actually the host is constantly bleeding people. Every week, a few hunters don't return from the hunt. Every couple of weeks, a nightmare creature attacks the walls and kills several guards before they manage to drive it away or destroy it. Kai sighed, but most often of all, something comes into the outer settlement and simply drags people away. That's not even mentioning those who die of hunger, desperation, or by another human's hand. Do you see where I'm going with this? Sonny scowled, a new understanding dawning on him. Seeing his expression, Kai looked away. Indeed, every year hundreds of people die in the Dark City, and every year hundreds more come to take their place. But Sonny, this year, there were only 4. Not 400, but just 4 people. How had he not thought about it before? Sonny's eyes widened slightly. Meanwhile, Kai continued, which means that the Bright Castle never got the chance to recoup its losses. What happens if that spell cycle theory that people have is true, and 5 months from now, when the winter solstice comes, the same thing repeats itself? He shook his head, a dark expression on his face. It means that a year from now, there will be maybe 600 humans left in the Dark City, and 2 years from now, there will be only a dozen or 2. It takes a lot of people to maintain the semblance of civilization we have going on here, Sonny. Once we pass the point of no return, it will all come crashing down. The beautiful archer glanced at him and added in a heavy tone, every non-combatant will die. Every fighter who is not powerful enough will die. Eventually, only a few strongest ones will be left. Am I strong enough to be among those few? I'm not sure. And even if I am, who would want to live in a situation like that? He turned away and stared at Nephis, who was walking ahead of them. So no, Sonny, I'm not a convert, but I will follow Lady Nephis to the edges of the labyrinth and back, because it's better to die trying to do something than to live on hiding your head in the sand. Don't you think? Just like that, their conversation ended. Sonny walked on in silence, thinking about what Kai had said. If the archer was right, then the future was indeed nothing short of disturbing. Of course, no one knew for sure how many sleepers were going to arrive here during the winter solstice. But now that he thought about it, Sonny felt that people who believed in the cyclic nature of the arrivals were almost right. He also believed that there would not be hundreds of new faces arriving on the Forgotten Shore in 5 months. However, while others expected that there would be a few dozen after a year, and 100 after that, he did not. For some reason, Sonny felt that there wouldn't be anyone else coming to the Dark City at all. He felt that the 3 of them and Castor were the last people to ever be sent to this hell by the spell. Gee, what's up with people today? First Effie and her doomsday talk, now this? I am already an extremely pessimistic person. I don't need anyone's help to feel terrible about the future. But as it turns out, he did need help. Those 2 conversations had opened Sonny's eyes to a serious problem. He was too short-sighted. He concentrated too much on the problems at hand and failed to see the bigger picture. Was it because both Effie and Kai had spent more time on the Forgotten Shore? Or was it because he had simply not paid enough attention to the details? Would things be different if he had? Just as Sunny glanced at Nephis, Cassia suddenly turned her head in his direction. Sunny frowned.
What is it? She has been ignoring me this whole time, but now she wants to talk? Huh.
The blind girl hesitated for a moment and then quietly said,
Something is following us. Something is following us.
Sunny's frown deepened. Not wasting any time, he moved forward and caught up to Nephis, Castor, and Effie. The huntress glanced at him and slightly tensed.
Did your shadow notice an enemy?
The shadow was currently a few hundred meters ahead of the cohort, scouting for any signs of danger. It never even glanced back, much less noticed what the looming threat was. Sunny shook his head.
Cassia felt that we were being followed. I'm going to withdraw the shadow and send it back to take a look. Stay vigilant.
Effie gave him a nod. Of course, as the pathfinder of the party, she was always vigilant. He was just warning her so that she could adjust her approach. The two of them were well accustomed to working together, so there was no need to waste words. Sunny commanded the shadow to return and fell back to the rear of the party. Once there, he concentrated on the shadows that surrounded them, trying to feel if there was something there that could not be seen. But there was nothing. Ahead of him, the rest of the cohort was silently preparing for the worst. Not wishing to let the unknown pursuer know that they were ready to act, no one summoned their weapons yet. No one had even turned their head. However, Sunny could see from the tension in their muscles that this peacefulness could explode into a storm of movement at any moment. Changing Star and her hunting party had not earned their fearsome reputation by mistake. Finally, the shadow was back. Not letting it rest for even a second, Sunny immediately sent it to observe the streets they had just left. His perception was split between its vision and his own. The feeling of vulnerability he experienced when the shadow was away heightened. Sunny sighed with grim resignation. The fact that he was at the back of the cohort and, as such, would be attacked first if anything happened did not help one bit.
Calm down. You don't even know what's tracking the cohort.
A few moments later, the shadow was safely hidden in the darkness of a ruined building. Observing the crossroad that one would have to pass to follow them, Sunny continued walking, pretending not to know anything. A few seconds passed in tense silence. Then a few more.
Where are you? What are you?
Depending on the nature of the mysterious pursuer, their response would be different. If it was a nightmare creature, they would either have to fight it or try to throw it off their scent. However, if the creature turned out to be one of the truly horrifying existences that stalked the ancient ruins, then things would get really tricky. There was also another possibility, and that was that they were not being pursued by a monster, but by humans instead. A team of hunters might have been sent by Gunlog to ambush Changing Star and her people. If that was the case, honestly, Sunny didn't know what would happen. Before, he would have thought that was inevitable. He had wondered why Gunlog hadn't come for Nephis and her hunting party already. However, he was sure of their ability to withstand an attack from the host, even if the enemy had a numerical advantage. The others seemed to share the same thought. After a few minutes passed, the shadow finally noticed movement. Someone was slowly walking in the middle of the street, not even trying to hide their presence. At first, Sunny thought that it was one of the revenants that populated the dark city. The figure, while human in appearance, was strangely crooked, with a dark, unadorned cloak hiding its limbs and features. But then, Sunny suddenly felt cold fear grip his heart. He recognized those glassy, lifeless eyes, the hideous pale face that terrified so many people. Horus. It was Horus, the murderous butcher who had torn Juby apart with his bare hands, Gunlog's cruel executioner and hidden blade. Walking through the cursed ruins with the same bored expression that he had in the grand hall of the Bright Castle on the day of Juby's execution, Horus was following in their footsteps. Gunlog did not send dozens of hunters to ambush Changing Star. Instead, he sent just one man. Sonny shivered.
Damn it. Why am I so afraid of that guy?
But he knew why. It was because deep down, he felt that they were alike. Horace was the personification of everything that Sonny was afraid to become. It should have felt like a slight. Gunlog didn't even bother to send a whole party after them, but the man he did send, he was frightening. Trying to shake off his fear, Sonny walked forward and glanced at Nephis. Then he said in a raspy voice,
It's that damn hunchback. He's following us.
A sudden tension permeated the air. Without having to look, Sonny knew that everyone's faces grew dark. Horace was a mystery. No one knew what his aspect ability was, let alone his flaw. All that was known about this terrifying man was that he was very powerful, and that not a single victim of his had survived. Nephis frowned. Is he alone? Sonny nodded.
Yeah.
To his right, Castor quietly scoffed. What is Gunlog thinking, sending one man against 6? However, Nephis did not share his disdain. Turning to her left, she glanced at Effie. There was a grim expression on her face. What do you think? The huntress hesitated for a few moments. Then, looking down from her considerable height, she simply said, I think we need to run. Castor scowled. Run? Why? Surely no matter how strong Horace is, we can take him down. None of us are weak either, even if we can't defeat him one-on-one. Effie shook her head.
You don't get it, do you? We can't fight Horace. No one can. Many people have tried, and they're all dead now.
She gritted her teeth.
He's a monster in human flesh, Castor. He is insanely powerful, but that's not even the problem. The problem is that no one knows his aspect. All we know is that once Horace comes for you, you die.
Effie jerked her head at the noise. Castor's expression faltered at how jumpy she had become. Sonny looked towards the noise too, but there was nothing there. Effie sighed.
I've seen many people try to resist once they caught wind that Gunlog is going to send Horace to get rid of them. Strong people, weak people. Some tried to fight him alone. Others recruited fearsome allies. Come the next morning, all of them were dead. No matter how powerful they were, or how many of them gathered to give him a fight, no one ever survived.
Effie gave Castor a grim look.
All that was left when they were found after was blood and corpses.
A somber silence settled among the cohort. Effie grimaced.
The weirdest part is, no one has even seen him come and go. Every time Horace has been sent to the outer settlement, we only learned that people were dead in the morning. Doors, locks, and barricades can't seem to stop him either. Once Horace is ordered to kill you, you just die. It is as though fate itself abandons you.
Castor frowned. So are you telling us that we stand no chance? The huntress shook her head.
I'm saying that fighting him right now would be stupid. Not unless we learn how he is able to seemingly turn his victims, no matter how many of them there are, completely powerless.
With that, she glanced at Nephis, who lingered for a moment and then shook her head. Our friend in the castle doesn't know either. Effie smirked bitterly.
Ah, so that mysterious friend of yours is not omniscient after all. Well, in that case, my advice stands. We should run.
At that moment, Sonny finally spoke up.
But Effie, can we even run away from him?
The smile disappeared from her face. Suddenly grim, she hesitated for a while and then said,
I know of a way, but it's going to be dangerous. Very dangerous. However, I don't know how else to shake him off our trail, so...
Sonny turned to Nephis and shrugged.
You decide, princess.
Nephis was silent for a bit. Her eyes met Sunny's for a moment, and then simply nodded, turning to Effie. We will face Horace some other day. Right now, reaching the resting place of the first cohort is the priority. The unruly huntress exhaled, almost as if relieved. Then follow me and prepare yourself. After that disturbing discussion, Effie changed their course slightly. Instead of moving straight south, they were now traversing the ancient city, heading for its eastern border. Sunny wasn't too familiar with this part of the ruins. During the past few months, he mostly stayed north of the Bright Castle, sometimes venturing northeast. He stayed away from the western areas because they were closer to the Crimson Spire and had not explored much of the south because it was too far away from his cathedral. The last time he had been here was on the day of the bloody fight against the Spire Messenger. Back then, they were headed for the ruins of the lighthouse that had once stood near the impregnable wall of the Dark City. Not that he had a lot of time to observe the surroundings. Pretty much all of his attention was concentrated on Horace, who was following them like a bloodhound. He didn't like having to stare at the menacing hunchback at all. Why don't you go fight some fallen creature and die, bastard? However, Horace seemed to know the ruins just as well as Effie. He somehow avoided the worst creatures on his path while never losing the scent of Changing Star's cohort. At one point, a lone blood fiend attacked him from the deep shadows of a dilapidated building. Gunlog's executioner simply raised a hand and shattered the skull of the nightmare creature with one lazy punch. Horace didn't even blink. Sunny tried to swallow a lump stuck in his throat. Big deal, he thought. I killed plenty of those too. However, Sunny had to admit that he was deeply unnerved by the power of the murderous hunchback. Maybe because he couldn't get rid of the feeling that, by the end of it all, only one of them would remain alive, and he wasn't sure which one. Soon, they were nearing the tall expanse of the city wall. Not too far away, the remnants of a giant tower lay broken on its side, stretching far away into the distance. The buildings that the tower had fallen on thousands of years ago were shattered and turned to dust. The ancient lighthouse might have been proud and magnificent once. Perhaps it had even served as a symbol of the defiant will of the people of the ancient city, burning as a shining beacon in the eternal darkness of the cursed night. But it had fallen a long time ago, just like the people that built it. At least its ruin remained. The ancient inhabitants of the Dark City had just vanished, not even leaving bones behind. Sunny sighed. Where to now? Effie gestured at the massive ruin. Inside. They were currently hiding in a collapsed building near the collapsed tower. This area was populated by an especially vile tribe of monsters, and attracting their attention would spell trouble for the entire cohort. Effie nodded to Sunny. Call your shadow back and keep it close. When we enter the lighthouse, we will have to act quick. Somewhat relieved, Sunny did just that. Not having to look at Horace anymore was a reason for celebration. But the lingering dread remained. He saw what Horace was capable of. He believed in the capabilities of their group, but Horace's aspect ability, did it cancel out all other powers? Staying low to the ground, the six of them dashed from their hiding spot to the broken lighthouse. Without wasting any time, they found a breach in its wall and climbed inside. Effie summoned her radiant memory, bathing the interior of the ruined tower in light. Due to the fact that it was currently lying on its side, they found themselves in a massive, echoing tunnel. Looking around, Effie found her bearings and led them deeper into the tunnel, extreme tension apparent in her every move. While walking, she began to speak. Listen to me very carefully and do as I say. Once we're inside, don't separate from the group. Stay together and keep your weapons at hand. The place we're going to is full of nightmare creatures. They're not too strong, but they're special. She bit her lip. Don't even try to kill them. Just defend yourself and keep moving. If you stop, you'll most likely die. Same thing if you slow down and get yourself surrounded. But if we can preserve our formation, we might survive. I hope. Sonny balked at her. He thought, "You hope? What do you mean, you hope?" Before Sonny could voice his outrage, they reached their destination. Right in front of him, the floor of the tunnel was broken, forming a narrow crevice. It was filled with darkness, leading deep down into the ground. And then deeper still. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see what was at the bottom. The huntress glanced at him. "What are you waiting for, doofus? Jump!" Sonny gulped. "You want me to jump? Into that?" By his side, Kai sighed and looked down on his freshly cleaned, stylish armor. An expression of pure sadness appeared on his beautiful face. "Oh well, here we go again." Without wasting any time, Nephis silently jumped into the crevice. Just before she did, white flames ignited in her eyes. If she was afraid, she hid it well. The darkness swallowed her lithe figure whole, like the maw of some unknown creature. "Damn it all!" With a resentful expression on his face, Sonny stepped forward. However, before he could approach the crevice, Castor inadvertently blocked his path. A moment later, the proud legacy was gone too. Sonny lingered for a moment and then looked back. He wanted to check if Cassia needed help going down, but he didn't have to worry. Kai was already gently holding her in his arms. The charming archer softly rose into the air, hovered there for a second, and then glided into the darkness. Sonny blinked a couple of times and shook his head. Show off. Effie soon followed the rest of the party, taking her radiant memory with her. Left alone in the darkness, Sonny shivered, wrapped himself in the shadow, and jumped down. He fell for a few seconds and then landed on hard stone, the impact sending a painful tremor through his bones. Standing up, Sonny found himself in a narrow tunnel. Its walls were made of weathered stone, clearly put there by human hands. The rest of the cohort was already there, preparing for battle. Nephis had summoned her silver longsword. Because the tunnel was not wide enough to freely use it, she was holding it with both hands. One armored gauntlet rested on the hilt, while the other was on the blade itself, halfway to its tip. Castor was wielding a sword too. However, his was a graceful Ji-yen with powerful patterns etched on its blade, with a triangular guard carved out of green jade. Sonny didn't know what was the tier of that memory, but he knew that it was extremely powerful. He had seen it cut through flesh, bone, and steel alike. Well at rest, it seemed that the Ji-yen emanated a ghostly green light. Effie had summoned her large round shield, but chose to leave the ancient bronze spear in the Soul Sea. While she was skilled enough to make use of it even in this narrow space, the shield would be much more formidable, especially considering her Herculean strength. Kai looked rather gloomy. Casting a mournful look over his shoulder on the fletching of his heavy arrows, he sighed and outstretched his hand. Instead of a bow, an elegant falcata appeared in it. The beautiful curve of its blade glinted, reflecting the light. The last one to draw her weapon was Cassia. Unexpectedly, she unsheathed the slender rapier from the scabbard that was attached to her belt and let go of it. To Sonny's surprise, the rapier did not fall to the ground, but rather stayed floating in the air as if attached to the blind girl by an invisible string. Then it rotated slightly and hovered in front of her, with its tip pointing straight at Sonny. What is that?" Cassia smiled and turned her head to him. Please forgive Quiet Dancer. She is shy around strangers." Sonny scratched the back of his head. "She? Did she say that thing is a she?" Sensing his confusion, Cassia smiled and explained, "Dancer is an echo and partner of mine. We work well together." As if answering her words, the rapier suddenly circled around the blind girl and returned to its previous position. It was still pointing at Sonny in a rather unfriendly way.
Huh. All right.
Interrupting their conversation, Effie called out to him.
Hey, Sonny, now would be the perfect time to invite your girlfriend to join us.
The rest of the cohort stared at them with confused expressions. Sonny felt his cheeks burning in embarrassment. He groaned, rolling his eyes.
How many times do I have to tell you she's not my girlfriend?
Noticing the weird stares that people were giving him, he sighed.
Effie, tell them.
The huntress did not even continue to tease him. Just this fact alone told Sonny how dire their situation really was. Effie explained to the others, her tone flat and to the point.
Sonny also has an echo, a powerful one at that. Go on, summon her.
Sonny nodded and did just that. A moment later, the stone saint stepped into the tunnel out of his shadow. Her ruby eyes were burning with crimson flames from behind the visor of the helmet. The taciturn monster briefly glanced at the people gathered around it, and then indifferently turned away to peer into the darkness. Just like that, their group of 6 had turned into a group of 8. Well, if a moody flying rapier could be counted to be a member. Suddenly, a distant noise made everyone freeze for a moment. With a dark expression, Effie looked in the direction it came from and sighed.
Right, we've wasted enough time already. Follow me and be ready.
With that, she took a step forward and headed deeper into the tunnel. Sonny followed, commanding the stone saint to stay close to Kai and Cassia. After a while, something crunched under his foot. Looking down, he saw a bone. A human bone.
What is this place?
The huntress glanced back and then answered in a somber tone.
The catacombs.
He frowned.
Since when are there catacombs beneath the Dark City? Why have I never heard you mention them?
Effie lingered before answering.
The catacombs were always here. They spanned beneath the whole city. It's just that most of the tunnels had collapsed a long time ago. As to why hunters don't like to mention them, it's because very few are crazy enough to explore what little remains of the catacombs, and even fewer return to tell the tale.
Then she added,
no matter how powerful Horus is, a person can only survive here if they know their way around, and only a couple of us outer settlement hunters do. So we should be able to lose him.
Meanwhile, Sonny noticed more and more bones littering the ground. All of them looked like they had once belonged to humans. He suppressed a shudder.
I don't like this.
Looking up, he asked,
can we get back to that thing you said about how very few people manage to escape from here alive? Why is that?
The huntress grimaced.
That's because...
Before she could even finish her sentence, something appeared out of the darkness and barred their way. Sonny opened his eyes wide. Right there in front of them, a corpse was standing on the edge between light and darkness, staring at the 6 humans with the black chasms of its empty eye sockets. No, not really a corpse. A skeleton. Defying all laws of logic and physics, a creature made of nothing but human bones suddenly lunged forward, baring its teeth in a hungry grin.
How the hell is that thing even moving?
Defying all logic, the skeleton lunged at Effie with a speed that even Sonny himself wasn't capable of. With no muscle tissue connecting the bones together, the strange creature was still able to stand upright, run, and attack with vicious strength. A moment before the undead monster closed the distance between them, Effie screamed,
"Stay together!"
Then she turned her torso and slammed her shield against the lunging monstrosity. With a thunderous crack, the skeleton was thrown back. Its skull and ribcage shattered, showering the tunnel with sharp bone splinters. Like a broken marionette, it fell to the ground in a shapeless pile. Sonny stared at the mess of broken bones in confusion.
Wait, that's it?
The huntress yelled, tearing him away from his confusion.
Don't stop, keep moving!
The cohort rushed forward, following Effie into the depths of the catacombs. When Sonny was approaching the remains of the reanimated skeleton, He noticed something that made a cold chill run down his spine. The bones were still moving, slowly assembling themselves back into the shape that resembled a human. Just as he stepped past the creature, one skeletal hand suddenly thrust in his direction, trying to claw at his leg. If not for Sonny's quick reaction, it might have succeeded in injuring him. With one slash of the midnight shard, he crushed the clawing hand and threw it away. Falling on the stones a few meters back, the hand remained motionless for a moment, and then began crawling back to the quickly recovering skeleton. The monster was being rebuilt by some terrifying invisible force. Drawn by its unseen pull, the bones were putting themselves back together, one after another. Those too damaged to be of use were simply replaced by one of the bones scattered on the floor of the tunnel. Soon, the skeleton would inevitably rise again. A disturbing thought entered Sonny's mind. He finally realized why Effie had told them to keep moving instead of trying to kill the nightmare creatures populating the catacombs. Was it because these creatures were immortal? Or rather, undead? Sonny felt a sickening feeling that he was right. If so, things were going to turn from bad to harrowing pretty fast. It was at that moment that his ears caught a distinct rustle coming from the darkness ahead of them. For a moment, he felt fear grip his heart, thinking that the dark sea had somehow found its way into the catacombs. But no, this wasn't the cursed sea. Instead, it was dozens, no, hundreds of skeletal feet scraping against the cold stones of the catacombs, maybe even thousands of them. The hordes of undead monsters populating the catacombs were coming to rip the 6 humans apart. With a grimace of dark resentment on his face, Sonny gripped the midnight shard tighter and hurried after the other members of the cohort. Sonny grunted and thought, Come and get it, bastards!" Pretty soon the undead creatures were upon them, first in ones and pairs, and then in small groups. The bloodthirsty skeletons assaulted them in a constant stream, appearing from the darkness of the catacombs. They lunged at the cohort in a whirlwind of bony claws and teeth, each bearing the same eerie skeletal grin. Effie and Nephis, who were at the front of the group, faced the brunt of the attacks. Effie let out a battle cry and smashed her shield into a cluster of skeletons. The huntress exerted her inhuman strength, bulldozing through the skeletons like an incarnation of ancient fury. Her round shield acted as a wrecking ball, shattering the undead monsters left and right. Nephis fought with the elegant fluidity of water, but also with the crushing force of a devastating flood. She was holding the long sword by the blade, using its crossguard and pommel as an improvised mace. With white flames dancing in her eyes, she moved from one skeleton to another, skillfully deflecting their blows and crushing one skull after another. If anything got past them, Castor was there to deliver the finishing blow. His sword shone with a ghostly green light, slicing through bones as if without meeting any resistance. The proud legacy fought with graceful precision, always managing to immobilize the enemy with just one clean strike. The skeletons fell to his sword before even having a chance to retaliate. The 3 powerhouses made paving the path through the horde of monsters seem almost easy. However, Sonny knew that it was anything but. Each skeleton was stronger and faster than a human could ever be. It took incredible skill, resolve, and coordination to cut through their ranks without slowing down even for a second. Soon he was forced to taste the true menace of these undead abominations for himself. Sonny, Cassia, and Kai managed to be spared from the brunt of the battle at first, but with each passing minute, their situation worsened. Soon, their swords started clashing, fending off a few skeletal limbs that reached through the front group. The catacombs were a real maze. More and more often, the tunnels they were taking began to open into complicated crossroads and connect with other branching paths. When that happened, undead creatures would lunge at the cohort from the side, bypassing the impenetrable barrier of Changing Star and her 2 champions. More than that, as the number of skeletons destroyed by them increased and several minutes passed, the abominable monsters began rising back from the ground and dashing in pursuit of the party, soon attacking it from the rear. Eventually, the cohort was constantly assaulted from all sides. When Sonny first had to raise his sword to repel a straggler that lunged at him from the side tunnel, he acted with calm precision engraved into him by countless hours of practice. Slashing with the Midnight Shard, he cleanly beheaded the undead creature. Augmented by the shadow, his tachi managed to cut through solid bone without much effort. Sonny knew that losing its head won't kill the skeletons, so he instantly shifted his balance and kicked the monster in the chest, throwing it back. Although he expected that this would happen, the lack of the familiar voice whispering into his ear still unnerved him. Usually he would have heard the announcement of the kill already, but these abominations were immortal, so the spell remained silent. There would be no rewards for any of these efforts. Lamenting the fact that he would not be getting any shadow fragments today, Sonny moved away from the decapitated skeleton and sighed. Well, at least this isn't as bad as I thought it would be. But just a few minutes later, he bitterly regretted thinking those words aloud. Once the cohort was surrounded from every side, Sonny, Cassia, and Kai had to join the battle in earnest. Sonny wasn't too worried for the blind girl and the archer because they were protected by both the Stone Saint and the Quiet Dancer. His shadow was probably the worst enemy the bloodthirsty skeletons could face. Moving with the cold precision of an emotionless battle machine, she used both her sword and shield to deflect and destroy any enemy that dared to approach them from the sides. The graceful and devastating dance she was performing was a true sight to behold. The Quiet Dancer zipped through the air, supporting the shadow and covering any lapse in the barrier of steel created by her. If something got past the two of them, Kai was there, using the curved blade of his Valkata to crush the undead monsters, almost as if felling them with an axe. Kai was holding hands with Cassia, guiding the blind girl through the dark maze of catacombs. However, it seemed as though her ability to orient herself in space had seen a considerable improvement in the past 3 months. It was perhaps due to the connection she shared with the flying rapier, or simply from gaining more and more experience in the dream realm. She was now able to move quickly without using her wooden staff for support at least. Looking at the two of them, Sonny grew somewhat sullen. Both Kai and Cassia were incredibly beautiful people. Holding hands and surrounded by nothing but darkness and monsters, with the charming young man gripping an elegant sword, they looked like an image from a book cover. They looked perfect together. Sonny, on the other hand, well, at least he had his shadow to keep him company, and the ordinary rock. However, he didn't have a lot of time to wallow in self-pity because he was the second most important role in this furious moving battle, holding the rear of the cohort all by himself. He huffed and prepared himself. Let me show you what I'm capable of. As more and more skeletons rose from the ground and attacked the party from behind, Sonny had to really exert himself. At first, he only had to fight one undead monster at a time. Despite their tremendous speed and strength, the skeletal creatures were not that hard to defeat. They seemed almost mindless, always attacking in the most straightforward way possible. They had no finesse, only brute force. Of course, a less prepared person would have been torn apart by these fierce creatures a long time ago, but Sonny was not the same weak and inexperienced kid he had been 7 months ago. The harrowing trials of the Forgotten Shore, as well as his tenacious will and grim resolve, had turned him into a fearsome creature too. In fact, in terms of pure viciousness, the skeletons had nothing on him at all, except for their ability to reassemble themselves after being struck down. Wrapping the Midnight Shard into the shadow to slice through the tough bones of the undead monsters more easily, Sonny employed every bit of battle prowess he had learned from his practice with the Stone Saint to destroy his enemies. Seamlessly weaving the firm and unassailable movements that he had learned from the taciturn stone creature into the flowing style taught to him by Nephis, he made short work of one skeleton after another. His blade sliced, slashed, and pierced through monster after monster, sending broken bones flying and cluttering to the ground. Of course, maintaining this state without falling behind the cohort was not easy. Sonny had never practiced fighting while on the run, especially not while moving backward. However, remembering Effie's words, he knew that being separated from the group and surrounded meant death, and thus made sure to never get too far away from his companions. At first, the situation was, if not easy, then at least within the scope of his capability. Sonny even thought that this was an excellent opportunity to put everything that he had learned in the past week into practice. Despite the fact that this battle was completely different from the way he had hunted monsters before, he was doing fine. Back on the streets of the Dark City, he hunted at night, always attacking the enemy from the shadows and aiming to finish the fight with one strike. The initiative was on his side, and so he was the one dictating the flow of combat. However, in this very moment, things were completely reversed. Sonny was the one being attacked, with enemies suddenly appearing from the darkness and instantly lunging at him. Put on the defensive, he had to react to the enemy attacks as opposed to being the one attacking. And yet, he was managing. He had anticipated that a situation like that would inevitably happen, but put enough flexibility into his technique to withstand any type of peril. He was indeed putting his lessons into practice, cementing them in his muscles and bones. After all, just like Nephis had said, 1,000 hours of training was not as impactful as one real fight. But then, slowly, things began to change. After he had ruthlessly cut down a handful of undead abominations, suddenly, two attacked him at the same time. Sonny cursed and ducked to the side, narrowly avoiding having his head crushed by one of the skeletons. His sword blocked the vicious strike from the other one, and, being pushed back a couple of steps by the force of the impact, he struggled to keep his balance. Not letting the monsters continue their assault unobstructed, Sonny dashed forward and twisted his body. Kicking one creature in the chest, he used it to propel himself toward the other one, and put all that weight into a devastating downward slash. The skeleton crumbled into a pile of broken bones, and the edge of the midnight shard scraped against the stones, causing sparks to fly into the air. Knowing that his momentum was too strong to stop now, Sonny instead went with it, rolled over his shoulder, and got back to his feet just in time to meet the attack of the remaining monster face to face. His sword cut a sharp arc, severing both arms of the skeleton. Sonny instantly sidestepped the undead creature and delivered a low horizontal slash, breaking its legs. Making sure that the monster wouldn't be standing up anytime soon by piercing its skull with the tip of the midnight shard, he hurried to catch up with the cohort. Briefly glancing at the rest of his companions, he made sure that they were not dead yet and swiftly turned around, ready to face the next monster. Then, his heart skipped a beat. Curses! 3 skeletons were rushing at him, menacing grins frozen on their skinless faces. As more enemies set upon the group, the situation became hectic. Sonny had to push himself to the limit to fight against multiple opponents while maintaining the pace with the rest of the group. Knowing that slowing down meant death, he slashed, dodged, blocked, and moved back without allowing himself even a moment of respite. Slowly but surely, countless wounds began accumulating on his body. His best efforts, impressive as they were, weren't enough, so he pushed himself past his limit. After all, this was the exact situation he had been preparing himself for by enduring the ruthless onslaught of the Stone Saint day after day. The inevitability of having to fight against an overwhelming force. Dark, vehement fury ignited in his chest, washing away pain and fear. Come and get me. I'm right here. Who did they think they were trying to kill? Noticing 4 new abominations answer his call, Sonny couldn't help but laugh. Good, bring it on. Their assault came fast and without mercy, not leaving him any room to breathe. But Sonny welcomed it. Dodging one of the skeletons, he dashed forward and positioned himself behind another one, so that his body blocked the path of the third. He couldn't do anything about the 4th one for the moment, but its attack was accounted for. It was going to hurt like hell, but not to the point of killing him. Bloodweave was going to take care of the rest. The midnight shard cut through the air and severed the undead creature's knee. The skeleton clumsily fell to the ground. At the same time, cold fingers tore into Sonny's side. He had already shifted his body to make sure that they were not going to damage any vital organs. With Puppeteer's Shroud taking most of the damage, Sunny only ended up receiving 5 deep scratches, which then instantly welled with blood. Sunny let out a loud, angry scream as pain shot up his arm. Ah! But he didn't regret the tactic. The only thing he regretted was the fact that, with the shadow wrapped around the Midnight Shard, he couldn't observe its movement during this long and arduous fight. Just imagining the kind of insight he could have gleaned from it filled him with avarice. Turning around and reversing his grip on the sword, Sunny commanded the shadow to move onto his body. Almost instantly, he felt a rush of power fill his muscles. In the same fluid movement, Sunny took a step toward the monster that had just wounded him and delivered a crushing blow with the pommel of the blade. The skeleton's jaw flew away in a rain of broken teeth. Taking another quick step, Sunny circled the disoriented creature, hooked its hand around its damaged skull, and tore it clean off the spine. Then he pushed the decapitated creature into the 2 remaining ones, briefly slowing down their approach. By the time the undead abominations regained their balance, Sunny was already upon them. The Midnight Shard flashed 3 times, turning the 3 skeletons into 3 piles of bones. Taking a step back, he narrowly avoided the claws of the last remaining skeleton, the one whose leg he had chopped off at the start of the skirmish. Sunny glanced at the creature that was madly crawling toward him and finished it off with one powerful thrust. Then he groaned.
Oh, crap. I think I overdid it.
Sunny was bruised, hurting all over, and covered in blood. What's worse, he was exhausted. This moving battle was too intense and had lasted for too long. Even with his endurance enhanced by the blood weave, he was nearing the point where his performance would start dropping rapidly. Once that happened, he would die. Because the damn undead creatures were not only immortal, but also tireless. Just as this thought appeared in Sunny's mind, a new wave of skeletons lunged at him from the depths of the tunnel. Tiredly raising his sword, he gritted his teeth. Suddenly, the tunnel they were currently in was drowned in a brilliant wave of pure white light. Glancing over his shoulder, Sunny noticed that Nephis had finally summoned her flames, channeling them into the blade of her sword. Just like on the day they had fought against the Carapace demon. Faced with the blinding radiance of the incandescent blade, the skeletons almost seemed to melt. Sunny sighed in relief. Perfect timing. Using the momentary disorientation of his own opponents, Sunny dashed back and commanded the Stone Saint to switch places with him. As they passed each other, he sent the shadow from his own body onto that of the taciturn Stone Knight. Almost immediately, the Stone Saint's eyes blazed with menacing carmine fire. Her skin shone with dark radiance, and wisps of ghostly gray fog appeared from beneath her stone-like armor, like dancing flames. The impenetrable darkness of the catacombs suddenly seemed to become even deeper, embracing her like a vast black mantle. Sunny smirked. Nephis wasn't the only one with tricks up her sleeve. A second later, the echo crashed into the undead creatures, sending splinters of bones and severed limbs flying through the air. She proceeded to massacre them, moving from one to another in a graceful storm of darkness and destruction. Taking the Stone Saint's place near Kai and Cassia, Sunny was able to rest for a few seconds. His battered body was screaming with pain, and the gray fabric of the puppeteer's shroud had turned heavy with blood. With 2 wielders of divine aspects activating their hidden cards almost simultaneously, the cohort got a chance to catch their breath for a few short moments. However, it was clear that this calm wouldn't last long. Sunny didn't really want to show all his cards yet, but the situation left him little choice. He doubted he could continue this mad dash for much longer. Plus, chances were that the rest of the party, preoccupied as they were with their own share of the undead monsters, would either fail to notice the sudden alteration happening to the Stone Saint, or assume that it was just an ability of hers. Using the opportunity, Sunny took a look at the condition of his companions. It was not good. Changing Star's armor was battered and torn, with blood seeping down her right side. Effie's shield looked like it was on the verge of coming apart, while her white chiton was painted red. Castor managed to preserve some semblance of a collected look. However, there was a deep gash under one of his eyes, his face bloodied and grim. Kai was doing not much better. He was pale and visibly exhausted, his auburn hair disheveled and soaked with sweat. Sonny didn't even want to think about his own sorry appearance. Only Cassia, whose Tier 6 armor made her less likely to be attacked by an enemy, looked more or less intact. However, her flying rapier had several visible nicks on its slender blade and looked tired and dispirited overall, as much as a flying weapon could look like anything. In short, one thing was painfully apparent from their state. If things didn't change soon, all of them were going to die. Skillfully using his sword to cut down a skeleton that had suddenly lunged at him from a side passage, Sonny strained his lungs and shouted,
Hey, Effie! How far are we from the exit from this damn place? When is this going to end?
Swatting away an undead monster of her own, the huntress briefly glanced back and grinned.
What end? This was just a warm-up.
If this was the warm-up, then they were surely all doomed. Sonny prepared himself for the worst. It took only a few moments before the short respite they had gotten was over. With a sound that reminded him of rushing water, a terrifying wave of undead monsters crashed into their formation, threatening to break it apart. Effie braced for the impact and withstood the furious onslaught, somehow managing to split the wave in two. From one side, Changing Star dove into the torrent of skeletal wraiths, her incandescent sword cutting through them like a ray of pure sunlight, piercing the darkness. From the other, Castor's enchanted blade was doing the same. The scion of the Lee family moved with astonishing speed, turning into a blurry whirlwind of ghostly green steel. Everything that touched it turned to dust. Sonny glanced at Kai, and his voice grew hoarse and tense.
Prepare yourself.
In the next moment, the wave of monsters was upon them. Left without the comforting protection of his shadow, Sonny could only rely on his own ability, cunning, and technique. Dashing forward, he clashed with the first skeleton. His sword flashed through the air with lightning speed, and a headless corpse instantly fell to his feet, blindly clawing at the stones in front of it. Sonny had never fought like this. From the first day on the Forgotten Shore, he always had something helping him resist the horrors of the Dream Realm, be it his shadow, cover of darkness, Changing Star, or the Stone Saint. Now, he had to face the torrent of nightmare creatures with nothing but his own frail human body and resolve. This was the ultimate test of pure skill. Gritting his teeth, Sonny tried to remember the feeling of clarity he had experienced after the Carapace Centurion had crushed his ribcage with one strike of its terrifying bone scythe. All unnecessary thoughts were obliterated by his will, leaving only two. His voice called out in his mind with one clear objective:
kill your enemy. Prevent the enemy from killing you.
Using this clarity, he entered the state of flow. His perception expanded, absorbing every detail and aspect of what was happening in the dark tunnel. His thinking accelerated, turning the mayhem that surrounded them into a stark and streamlined pattern of cause and effect. Connected to the underlying law of it all, Sonny was able to react to the actions of his enemies faster and predict them better. With a hissing sound, the Midnight Shard cut the air and slashed the next monster across the chest, splitting the skeleton diagonally in two. Without paying the defeated creature any attention, Sonny instantly lunged at the next one. His movements were fluid and unpredictable, but also grounded and firm. Every strike and every step was calculated and efficient, focused on delivering the maximum amount of damage while preserving as much of his strength as possible. It was a perfect combination of the two seemingly contradictory battle styles that he had learned. Just like that, Sonny danced between the countless undead monsters, his sword cutting one after another down. The Midnight Shard wasn't unimaginably sharp like Castor's Jan, nor filled with annihilating white flame like Neff's radiant longsword. However, it refused to give in and remained unbroken. No matter how many tough bones Sunny's sword cut, not a single dent appeared on its blade. With blood streaming down his body and sweat biting his eyes, his muscles on the verge of breaking apart, and his lungs desperately burning for air, Sunny somehow kept his mad tempo and fought. At some point, he heard a furious roar from somewhere ahead and briefly looked up, noticing that Effie had dismissed her battered round shield and finally summoned the beautiful bronze spear. With it in her hands, the huntress became even more deadly. Multiple skeletons burst into a shower of broken bones, cut apart by a wide arc of the ancient weapon. However, at the same time, more and more wounds started accumulating on Effie's body. Despite everything, things weren't going well for the cohort. Or at least, it seemed that way for a while. At some point, however, Sunny noticed that the number of skeletons attacking the cohort from the front had begun to diminish. Pretty soon, Nephis, Effie, and Castor were getting a few moments to catch their breaths from time to time. The pressure on himself had also lessened. The Stone Saint, on the other hand, had to hold off an ever-increasing number of undead creatures attacking the party from the rear. When the balance of the rolling battle noticeably shifted, Changing Star gave a command to change the formation of the cohort. She quickly dashed back to reinforce the taciturn shadow, while Sunny moved forward to support Castor and Effie at the head of the group. Once he got there, the huntress gave him a tired smile.
Hey, doofus. You look like shit.
Sunny glanced down and had to agree with her. His armor torn in a dozen places and soaked through and through with blood. He looked pretty much exactly as dead as the nightmare creatures they were fighting. However, Effie's state wasn't any better. He marveled at the woman's ability to keep a light spirit even now. She could be infuriating sometimes, but now more than ever, he appreciated her playfulness. He smiled crookedly.
Thanks. You're quite a looker yourself, you know.
The huntress scoffed and then turned away to face another of the undead abominations.
Hold fast. We're almost there.
She told the truth. An end to the tunnel was finally in sight. All they had to do was somehow sustain this impossible pace just a few minutes longer. After several more minutes of furious fighting, the tunnel they were moving through suddenly opened into a large cavern. A few meters in front of them, the floor of the catacombs was broken, collapsing into a vast, seemingly bottomless chasm. That terrifying abyss was filled with darkness that even Sunny's sight couldn't pierce. The chasm was no less than 40 meters across and stretched far into the distance to both left and right, like a dark border separating the world of the living from the world of the dead. A rickety rope bridge was drawn across it, connecting to a similar-looking tunnel at the other end of the abyssal chasm. The rope bridge looked like a derelict of ancient times. It was flimsy, slippery, and rotten through and through. Sunny's eyes went wide and his heart sank. He swallowed and said silently,
She doesn't expect us to actually use it, does she? It's so obvious that this thing will collapse as soon as we step on it. Has she not seen any action films? Even if others somehow survive, there's no chance that I, with that damn fated attribute, will make it to the other end.
Sunny turned to Effie and scowled, really hoping to be surprised by her answer.
So, what now?
The huntress looked at him in confusion.
What else? We crossed the bridge.
Nephis and the Stone Saint stood at the rear of the group, doing their best to hold back the torrent of nightmare creatures pouring down the tunnel. Sunny and Effie were in the lead, and Sunny found himself staring at the flimsiest rope bridge imaginable. Beneath it was a terrifying chasm that would spell certain doom if the bridge gave way. Sunny swallowed a lump in his throat. How on earth were they supposed to get their party across that rickety thing? He'd be surprised if that thing could hold even Effie without splintering into a pile of dust. He did not survive this entire fight just to die because of this stupid structure. His eyes flit around the cavern, searching for another plan, but there was none. He glanced back at Nephis. She could only hold off the skeletons for so long. Sonny sighed and gathered himself. At least the damn thing was empty of the skeletons. The path to the other side of the chasm was clear. While Sonny was consumed by these unhappy ruminations, Effie and Castor quickly threw the few undead creatures remaining in front of them over the edge of the chasm. Finally safe from their constant attacks, most of the cohort took a chance to quickly catch their breaths. Only Nephis and the Stone Saint were still fighting. In fact, the overwhelming pressure of the pursuing horde had grown so heavy that they were barely holding on. Two figures, one shrouded in shadows, the other bathed in pure white light, were slowly buckling under the furious onslaught of the army of the dead. Sonny gritted his teeth. If nothing changed, they were going to be the ones being thrown into the dark abyss very soon. With a grim expression on his face, he glanced at Effie. "Go!" Leaning on her spear, the huntress weakly shook her head. "Someone will have to hold them off long enough for everyone to get to the other side. You should—" Sonny interrupted her. "I'll be the last one to cross. Don't worry, I have a plan." And to his surprise, he did. It was a crazy plan, but what else was new? Giving him a long look, Effie hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. "All right. Stay alive, Sonny." He quietly chuckled. "Aw, I didn't know you cared." She stared at him for a bit and smirked. "No, it's just that if you die, pretty soon I'll have to fight your scrawny corpse. So, don't do that, okay?" With that, Effie beckoned others to follow her and stepped on the rickety bridge. Sonny blinked a couple of times, watched her go, then turned his back to the chasm and sighed. He thought, "Right, what else did I expect?" In any case, there was no way back now. Brandishing the midnight shard, he dashed forward and joined Changing Star and the Stone Saint in their desperate fight. Dispatching a couple of skeletons, Sonny briefly turned to Nephis. "Retreat to the bridge. Saint and I will hold them off." Her eyes shone with white flames through the visor of the Starlight Legion armor's helmet. A moment later, he heard a hoarse voice. "Are you sure?" He dodged the claws of an especially menacing monster, bashed it away with the pommel of his sword. "Yes, but—" Another undead creature fell to the midnight shard. "When you get to the other side, you need to destroy the supports of the bridge. Do you understand?" Changing Star hesitated, almost missing the timing of her attack. "What about you?" Sonny laughed. "Don't worry about it. I have a way to get across." Neff didn't answer for a while. Finally, she simply nodded. "All right." Not one to waste words, Changing Star didn't say anything else. When the opportunity presented itself, she silently retreated, letting Sonny take her place. Sonny steeled himself. "Now, for the hardest part." With Nephis gone, all the monsters of the catacombs descended upon the Stone Saint and him. Sonny cursed, feeling that the tiniest mistake would spell his doom. The onslaught of the undead horde was beyond anything he had expected. Desperately trying not to drown in the torrent of ferocious abominations, Sonny fought with everything he had left. Damn it all! How the hell was she able to hold this position for so long? Not prone to heroic displays, Sonny used the Stone Saint as a meat shield. Stone shield? And hid behind her from time to time, emerging from the cover of the taciturn monster only to deliver a strike or two and disappear again. The two of them worked beautifully together, almost as if sharing one mind. Well, what else did he expect? She was his echo after all. And his shadow was currently wrapped around her stone body. The armor of the menacing knight was still mostly intact. However, even it was battered and broken in several places. With a dark expression on his face, Sonny noticed a stream of ruby dust pouring from one of the breaches. The Stone Saint was wounded. This needs to end fast.
Feeling his own endurance running out, Sonny wanted nothing more than to fall to the ground and rest, even if it meant dying. But instead, he doubled the intensity of his attacks. There was no need to hold anything back and preserve his strength anymore. He just needed to last for a bit more, a dozen seconds at most. But even a dozen seconds seemed like an impossible dream. Impossible. He knew someone who was in the habit of making impossible things happen. With a furious growl, Sonny cut another skeleton apart, received a glancing blow to his already wounded side, and stumbled back. The Echo appeared in front of him, enduring a rain of attacks with the help of her already battered shield. Her feet slid on the stones, but the taciturn knight stubbornly held. He glanced back at the bridge. It was still standing. Why hadn't Nephis cut it? As if answering his silent cry, a loud rattle, followed by a thunderous boom, informed him that the bridge had been brought down. Now there was nothing connecting the two sides of the terrifying chasm. Sonny was left alone against the horde of immortal monsters, with no way to retreat. Finally! Turning his back to the undead creatures, Sonny peered into the darkness. Seeing the cohort waiting for him on the other side of the dark abyss, he lingered for a moment, sighed, and ran to its edge. The shadow slipped from the body of the stone saint and wrapped itself around his own. Suddenly weakened, the taciturn monster held the entire horde back by herself for a split second and then dissolved into darkness, returning to the tranquil expanse of the Sea of Soul. With no obstacles to slow them down anymore, the flood of skeletons lunged forward. They were just a meter or two behind Sonny, stretching their deadly claws to tear him apart. Too close! Approaching the abyssal chasm, Sonny briefly glanced into the impenetrable darkness that filled it, and without pausing even for a second, jumped off the edge. Jumping into the bottomless dark abyss, Sonny briefly regretted every decision he had ever made in his life. How did he end up in this situation? Where did he go wrong? However, there was no time for self-reflection. He wasn't ready to see his whole life flash before his eyes yet. There were more pressing matters. Before the momentum of his jump waned, Sonny summoned the prowling thorn. By the time the triangular dagger materialized in his hand, he was already beginning to fall. Not wasting any time, Sonny threw it with as much power as he could, while simultaneously sending the shadow from his hand onto the blade of the midnight shard. The throwing dagger flashed in the darkness of the underground cavern, streaked the wide chasm, and embedded itself into the hard rock on the other side of it. Because of the enhancement of the shadow, it got deeply lodged in the stone. Sonny felt a wave of relief wash over him. Yes! A moment later, the unbreakable string connecting the prowling thorn to Sonny's wrist drew tight. Instantly, his hand was violently jerked forward. Holding on for his dear life, Sonny swung through the darkness with incredible speed. Behind him, dozens of skeletons plummeted into the chasm, with more being pushed down with each second. However, he was already far away. Ha! Enjoy the trip, you bastards! A couple of seconds later, all humor was smashed out of him by the hard impact against the opposite wall of the crevice. Sonny tried to soften the blow a little, but it still hurt like crazy. His bones groaned, on the verge of breaking apart. A couple of them probably did. Sonny blacked out for a moment or two. When he came back to his senses, his wrist was in agony. With the invisible string of the prowling thorn slowly cutting deep into his skin, hissing, Sonny gripped the thin string with his other hand and relieved a part of the pressure. Then he looked up. 10 or so meters above him, 5 pale faces hovered above the edge of the cliff. On them were written expressions of horror, shock, and astonishment. Sonny let out a surprised chuckle as he realized that none of his companions knew that he had this memory. To the cohort, his desperate trick must have looked like simple suicide. From the perspective of people who didn't know about the secret enchantment of the prowling thorn, Sonny just took a running start and jumped into the abyss, only to disappear into its darkness without a trace. It was as though he had chosen to sacrifice his life to give the others a chance to escape. Like some sort of a stupid hero. Surely they had to know him better than this by now. Swinging on the invisible string, Sonny strained his aching chest. "Hey, everyone! I'm down here!" Slowly, 4 of the 5 faces turned to look straight down. Their expressions were rather comical. Cassia simply tilted her head, and her expression was priceless as well. Grinning, Sonny began to climb up. Since the string of the prowling thorn could change its length at will, he commanded it to shorten and rode comfortably all the way up, stepping lightly on the vertical wall of the chasm from time to time to make the process faster. Soon, he climbed over the edge of the cliff and sprawled on the cold ground, breathing heavily. The rest of the cohort just stared at him. He stared back at them. "What?" Effie was the first to speak. Glad you're alive, Sonny, but also, what the hell? How did you do that?" He simply threw the prowling thorn at her feet. Once the huntress bent down to pick it up, Sonny pulled on the invisible string and made the dagger fly back into his hand. "Oh, that? That was a piece of cake. Nothing that a knife and a piece of string can't solve. More or less." He decided to omit the fact that he had almost soiled his pants in the few short moments between jumping off the edge of the chasm and successfully embedding the prowling thorn into the rocks on the other side of it. Effie blinked a couple of times, then slowly straightened herself up. "Cool memory. Where did you get it?" Sonny dismissed the dagger and tiredly waved his hand. "You know those porcupine monsters back in the city? I got it off one of those." With that, the others left him alone. They were all hurt and dead tired too. Everyone needed to rest and patch up their wounds. Nephis made a move to try and heal them, but was stopped by Effie. The huntress darkly shook her head. "Not yet. There's one last hurdle to overcome. We'll need you to be at the top of your game." Changing Star glanced at her, lingered for a few moments, but then sat back down. Out here, the word of the Pathfinder was law. If Effie said that Nephis needed to save her strength, then she had to obey. Sonny was too exhausted to care. He knew that he was not going to bleed out thanks to the bloodweave, and that was enough for now. He just wanted to rest. Sometime later, he heard a shuffling sound and looked up to see Kai sitting down near him. The charming archer looked way too pretty and put together for a person who had just lived through the same mayhem as them. But Sonny was starting to suspect that this infuriating trait was just something he would have to come to terms with. Maybe Kai had some weird attribute that made him look good no matter the circumstance. Looking at the beautiful young man, Sonny sighed. "Hey, Knight. How are you doing?" Kai scratched the back of his head. All right, yes. That was intense back there, huh?" Sonny nodded. "Yeah, so, what's up?" The charming archer hesitated for a bit. "Nothing, really. I just wanted to say 3 things to you." Sonny eyed him cautiously. What an oddly specific statement. But now he had to hear these 3 things. "Oh? All right, go on." Kai looked at him thoughtfully. "Well, first of all, I now fully understand what you meant when you said that you are crazy. Because that jump of yours, that was really crazy." Sonny chuckled. "I guess so. I'm alive though, aren't I?" The archer gave him a nod and smiled. "Another thing I wanted to say is that I also understood how you managed to survive all those months in the ruins. Your swordsmanship, I've never seen anything like it. I think that very few people in the Dark City would survive a clash against you. So, everything makes more sense now." Sonny didn't know how to feel about that praise. On one hand, it was nice to be acknowledged for something he had worked so hard on. On the other hand,
He still preferred being considered a cowardly weakling. It made killing fools far easier. He shrugged.
Thanks, I guess. What's the third thing?
Kai was silent for a long time, as though trying to find the right words. Finally, he shook his head and spoke with a cautious tone. Right. About that jump of yours. You do remember that I can fly, right? So I could have carried you over the chasm, no problem. So, why did you do it? Sonny stared at him silently for a while, an inexorable expression on his face.
God damn it!
To be honest, in the chaos of it all, he did forget about this crucial detail. Kai flashed his dazzling smile and laughed lightly. Sonny shrugged.
I don't know, it just seemed like a good idea at the moment.
Kai blinked and gave him a strange look. A good idea. Sonny cleared his throat and then glared at the charming young man.
It worked, didn't it? So, let's not talk about it again. Ever. Okay?
Sonny savored this moment of lightheartedness. He knew it would be fleeting. If Effie was to be believed, and she was, then the next step in this journey would be just as harrowing as this one. Sonny felt like he could sit on this cold, damp stone floor forever. After the absolutely brutal battle at the mouth of the tunnel, the peace was a balm for his soul and his body. But he knew they could only spend so long regrouping. After a while, Sonny regained enough of his senses to warily look around. The tunnel they were currently in was somewhat different from those they had traversed while fighting the horde of undead monsters. It looked more weathered and decrepit, with its walls and floor smooth and uneven, as though eroded by something over the course of countless years. What's worse, it was wet. With a cold shiver, Sonny realized that they were surrounded by puddles of black water. The smell of sea salt permeated the air. Looking up, he found the tall figure of the boisterous huntress and asked in a raspy voice,
Where are we?
Effie glanced at him and gestured up.
100 meters or so below the surface, pretty much exactly under the city wall.
He stared at her blankly, slowly thinking through the implications of the statement. Could this be where the water went at night when the tide went out? He had always thought the tides were naturally occurring, but maybe there was even more to the city than he suspected.
If we're under the city, does that mean...
Sonny let the implication dangle in the silence. The huntress gave him a nod.
Yeah, you guessed correctly. Come night, this place is going to be full of seawater. That chasm behind us is what prevents the catacombs from being flooded by the dark sea.
Effie sighed tiredly.
So unless we want to drown or be eaten by some depth dweller, we need to get out of here as soon as possible.
Sonny closed his eyes, imagining a roaring torrent of black water erupting from the mouths of countless tunnels and falling into the abyssal chasm like waterfalls made of pure darkness. Yeah, if they were still underground when that happened, sea monsters would be the least of their problems. The sea itself would kill them. Luckily, the day was still young, and the group had already been able to heal up a decent amount. Sonny was not the only person listening to Effie's words. A few moments later, Nephis rose to her feet and glanced at the members of the cohort. Her pale face was calm and composed.
Time to go. Gather your strength.
With sighs and groans of pain, everyone stood up. Sonny was the last one to follow suit. His muscles ached, and he thought to himself,
Ouch, that hurts. I'm really starting to wonder if fighting Horus was a better choice.
But the truth was, as terrible as the battle with the skeletons might have been, they were at least predictable. Gunlog's wicked enforcer, on the other hand, was a complete unknown. There was nothing worse than facing an enemy that you knew nothing about. Nephis's voice pulled Sonny from his thoughts.
Let's move. If anyone sees anything strange, alert me immediately.
As the cohort headed deeper into the tunnel, Sonny caught up with Effie. and asked with a hint of idle curiosity in his voice,
"By the way, how do you even know your way around the catacombs?"
It wasn't like she could have leisurely explored these deadly tunnels alone. The huntress gave him a dubious look and shrugged.
"This knowledge is sort of passed down between the outer settlement hunters. I've been here a couple of times before, trying to escape from especially terrible nightmare creatures. Although, to be honest, I only descended this deep into the catacombs once."
Effie shivered and continued on.
"I was new in the Dark City at that time. Back then, the strongest hunter in the outer settlement sort of took me under her wing. We went down here with an entire party."
Sonny scratched the back of his head and grimaced when his battered body protested against the sudden movement.
"Yeah? That party must have been very strong to return from this place alive."
The huntress glanced at him, and a darkness flickered in her eyes.
"Who said anything about returning alive? Actually, they all died. I was the only one to survive." "If they all died, then why the hell did you bring us here?"
Effie shrugged.
"Because, no matter how strong that party was, they weren't even close to this one. Do you even realize how powerful the 6 of us are all put together? God damn, I wouldn't want to be our enemy."
Then she hesitated for a few moments and added,
"Plus, this time I know what we're going to face. We'll get out of here in one piece. Trust me."
Sonny wasn't a particularly trusting person, but at this point, he didn't really have a choice. Leaving the tall huntress alone, he walked in silence for a while. The tunnels were now strongly angled down. With each minute, the cohort was descending deeper and deeper underground. Slowly, his curiosity awakened. Now that the harrowing battle against the army of the dead was behind them, Sonny began to wonder about something peculiar. Where did all those human skeletons come from? There were hundreds, if not thousands of them down here in the catacombs. Even if every hunter that had ever lived in the outer settlement died in these tunnels, their number wouldn't account for that much. Not to mention that people who perished in the Dark City tended to end up eaten by some terrible monster, their bones pulverized into dust by its teeth. His pointless pondering was interrupted by Effie, who suddenly gestured for the cohort to stop. After discussing something with Nephis, she gave her a nod and turned to the rest of them.
"Listen up. We're close to the central chamber of this maze. The exit to the surface is right ahead. However, getting to it won't be easy."
The tall huntress hesitated and then said,
"If we want to make it outside, we will have to act fast. There's a big fat bastard of a nightmare creature that lives in that chamber. However, it takes time for it to fully wake up. So don't stop to look at it. Don't panic. Don't lose your cool. It might look scary, but if you follow Neph and do what she tells you to do, you should be all right."
She waited for a bit to make sure that everyone understood her meaning, and then grinned.
"All right, if everyone is ready, let's go meet the Lord of the Dead."
Sonny's brow furrowed. The Lord of the Dead? This creature they're going to have to sneak by is called the Lord of the Dead? Sonny did not like the sound of this name one bit. Sonny summoned the Midnight Shard and reluctantly followed after Effie. They swiftly entered the giant underground chamber. Once Sonny saw what was inside of it, his eyes grew wide. He finally understood where all those skeletal wraiths came from. He also understood where the inhabitants of the ancient city had gone. They were all here.